Somewhere in a London studio in the late 2000s, there was a pile of rejected cartoon characters, failed pitches, unsold mascots, drawings nobody wanted. And one quiet French animator looked at that pile and decided that the rejects deserved a world of their own. That decision became the amazing world of Gumball, and almost every strange, beautiful thing about this show traces back to it. Tonight we're going through the hidden facts behind all of it. The real town the show secretly photographs, the voice actors who kept aging out of their own characters, the bootleg copy from another country that the show took revenge on air, the famous British actor hiding inside a cyclops, all of it. So get comfortable, turn the lights down, we'll be here a while, and if you haven't subscribed, it really does help us keep making these. Welcome to Cortoon. Let's begin with that pile of rejects. Every show has an origin story, but Gumball's origin story is unusually honest about what it is. Ben Bocquelet, the show's creator, was a French animator who had spent years working in commercials. And when you work in commercials, you design characters constantly, mascots for products that never launch, cute faces for campaigns that get canceled in a boardroom, characters that exist for exactly one meeting and then go into a folder and never come out. By the end of the 2000s, Bocquelet had a collection of these orphans. A blue cat here, a goldfish there. Little drawings with no home. The fact that changes how you see the entire series is this. When Bocquelet got the chance to pitch his own show, his first idea was not a cheerful family comedy. His original pitch was about those rejected characters attending a remedial school. A school for rejects, a place where the commercial cast-offs, the failed mascots, the characters nobody wanted, would be sent to be fixed. And the producers looked at that idea and told him essentially that it was too sad. Think about that for a moment. The first version of Gumball was a show about being unwanted, about characters who exist but have no purpose, warehoused together in a place designed to make them useful again. That was the seed. The network felt the premise was too melancholy for a children's channel, so Bocquelet revised it. He kept the characters, kept the mismatched styles, and wrapped them inside something warmer, the structure of a family sitcom. A mom, a dad, 3 kids, a school, a town. Picture the working life that produced that folder, because it explains the show's entire sensibility. Commercial character design is a brutal little art form. You're asked to create something lovable on command, by committee, for a product, on a deadline, and then watch a room full of people who will never think about it again decide its fate in 9 seconds. The characters that survive become corporate property. The ones that don't become nothing at all. Not even failures, just unspent effort, faces with no future. And the artist is expected to feel nothing because feeling something about a rejected yogurt mascot is ridiculous. Bocquelet's quiet heresy was deciding it wasn't ridiculous, that the little faces were owed something. Most creators mine their childhoods or their relationships for material. He mined his recycling bin, and the result is the only show in television history whose premise is, functionally, a labor grievance on behalf of imaginary beings. But here's the thing about creative DNA. You can revise a pitch, but you can't fully remove the original idea from it. The sadness didn't disappear, it went underground. And once you know this piece of history, you start seeing it everywhere in the finished show. Elmore is a town where a balloon dates a cactus, where a piece of toast walks to work, where a Tyrannosaurus Rex attends middle school, and nobody ever explains why. The official reason is comedy. The hidden reason, the structural reason, is that every one of these characters was born somewhere else, for some other purpose, and this world is where they ended up. Elmore, read this way, is the remedial school with the labels filed off. It is a sanctuary town for rejected designs. The show never says this out loud, it doesn't have to. It is the show's foundation, literally the actual production history of the actual drawings on screen. And the show eventually found a way to make that subtext into canon, which we'll get to later tonight because there is an actual place inside the show's universe where the rejected things go. And the first time the show takes you there, it quietly confirms everything I've just described. But hold that thought, because before the mythology, you need the machine that built it. So let's talk about where this show was physically made, because that part of the story is stranger than it has any right to be. Gumball was not made in Burbank. It was not made by an established animation giant with decades of pipeline experience. It came out of a brand new operation in London called Cartoon Network Development Studio Europe, a studio that the network had set up specifically to find and develop new ideas from the European side of the Atlantic. And Bocquelet's job there at first was not to make his own show. He was hired to help other people pitch their shows. He was the guy who polished other creators' ideas for the executives. The man whose actual job description was, in a sense, processing other people's dreams, sitting on a folder full of his own rejected characters. A creative director at the Animation House Studio, aka, had encouraged him to join the new Cartoon Network studio. And while he was there, helping everyone else pitch, he finally pitched his own thing. The Reject School, then the Revision, then the Green Light. The show premiered on Cartoon Network on May 3, 2011, and it ran for 6 seasons and 240 episodes, ending in June of 2019. And that London studio he worked in did not stay obscure. Years later, that same operation would carry one of the most famous names in the history of animation, because when the franchise came back to life in the 2020s, the revival was produced by Hanna-Barbera Studios Europe. The studio born to develop pitches in London now wears the name of the company that made The Flintstones. The show about rejects, in other words, became the flagship of a studio named after animation royalty. There's something almost suspiciously perfect about that arc, and we'll walk through the whole afterlife of this franchise, the canceled movie, the cliffhanger that sat unresolved for 6 years, the streaming revival near the end of tonight's journey. But first, I want to show you the town, because the single most disorienting hidden fact about the amazing world of Gumball, the one that makes people stop and rewind when they learn it, is that Elmore is real. Not inspired by a real place, not loosely based on one, photographically real. If you have ever watched this show and felt that the streets look strangely familiar, strangely solid, strangely unlike any other cartoon background you've seen, that's because you may have driven down them. The town of Elmore is built out of photographs of Vallejo, California, a real city in the San Francisco Bay Area. The show's fan wiki, which has cataloged this in obsessive detail, documents that Elmore's geography essentially mirrors Vallejo's, that the houses on the Watterson Street correspond to real houses, that the storefronts and intersections and parking lots of this cartoon town exist in the physical world, photographed and lightly retouched and used as the stage on which the animated characters perform. The school the kids attend, Elmore Junior High, borrows its exterior from Abraham Lincoln High School in San Francisco. The schoolyard where so many recess scenes take place comes from the playground of a real elementary school in Vallejo. The production sourced location imagery from both the United States and the United Kingdom, which is why, if you look closely, Elmore sometimes feels like 2 continents quietly stitched together. An American suburb with occasional British bones. Look closely at Elmore's storefronts and street furniture on a rewatch, and the transatlantic stitching becomes a game of its own. Fans who hunt the backgrounds report the tells, signage conventions that read American on one block and unmistakably British on the next, architecture that jumps continents between scene cuts, the occasional unmistakably European street fixture standing in a Californian intersection like a tourist who wandered into the wrong photograph. The town is a collage wearing a trench coat, and once you see it, the seams become affectionate rather than sloppy, because there are the production's fingerprints. A London studio building an American suburb out of whatever real streets its staff could photograph, the same way the cast was built out of whatever orphaned characters the creator could rescue. Elmore is a town with no consistent country, populated by characters with no consistent medium, and it all coheres anyway, which was always the entire argument of this series, conducted at every scale from the cast list down to the curbstones. Consistency was never what made a world feel real. Conviction was. Sit with how strange a choice that is for a children's cartoon. Most animated shows draw their backgrounds because drawing them gives you control, consistency, a unified style. Gumball deliberately threw that unity away. The characters are flat drawings or fuzzy puppets or plastic-looking computer models, and they walk through a world made of real concrete, real lawns, real overcast sky. The show implies, through its very construction, that these cartoon beings are living in our world, not a parallel cartoon universe, ours. And that's not an accident of budget. That is the rejected commercial characters thing again. A mascot designed for an advert is a cartoon designed to stand in the real world, in real supermarkets, on real billboards, next to real products. Bockley took characters born for that context and gave them a whole photographic town to inhabit. The style of Gumball is the style of advertising with the product removed. Rate it that way, and the show becomes a strange documentary about what commercial art does when it's finally off the clock. And there's a softer fact hiding inside this one. Because the show photographed a real city, the show has accidentally become an archive of that city. Storefronts that have since closed, streets that have since changed. Fans in Vallejo post side-by-side comparisons, the real corner and the Elmore corner, and sometimes the cartoon version is the only version of a building that still looks the way it looked in 2011. A show about a fictional town quietly preserved a real one. Nobody planned that. Time did that. Take a second with the strangest implication of all of it. Somewhere in the real world tonight, there is a house that fans recognize as the Watterson house. An ordinary suburban home on an ordinary street that millions of children around the planet would identify on sight because its photograph, lightly dressed, was the stage for a decade of cartoon chaos. The people who pass it on their commute mostly have no idea. There's a high school in San Francisco whose facade doubled for 9 years as the most chaotic middle school in animation. There's a playground in Vallejo where real children play on the same blacktop where drawn children fought tyrannosaurs. The membrane between Elmore and here was always exactly one photograph thick. Most shows build a world to escape into. This one quietly insisted that the world you already live in was strange enough to host talking balloons, you just had to layer them in. And the older the show gets, the more that choice feels less like a budget trick and more like a philosophy. The magic was never somewhere else. It was composited onto your street. The pilgrimage culture this has created is its own little phenomenon, and it's still growing. Because the locations are real and findable, Gumball fandom developed a tradition that almost no other cartoon can support: the location visit. Fans travel to Vallejo and the San Francisco area and photograph themselves at the real corners, outside the real school facade, on the real playground blacktop, holding up phones with the corresponding Elmore screenshots for comparison, the cartoon frame, and the living street lined up in one image. Social feeds fill with these side-by-sides, and local threads in Vallejo itself pass around the strange pride of it. Our gas station is in a cartoon. Our intersection is famous to 12-year-olds in other hemispheres. There's something quietly moving in the ritual, a children's show functioning as a reason for people to stand on an unremarkable American corner and feel like they're somewhere, because for them, they are. The show borrowed the town's geography for a decade, and in return, it left the town a permanent second existence, an invisible tourist layer, an Elmore-shaped ghost over the real streets, and the residents walk through it daily, mostly unaware that for a global audience, their commute crosses sacred ground. The first thing the network ever broadcast of this world, by the way, was an episode called The DVD, on that May 3rd premiere night in 2011, a story built on the most mundane suburban terror imaginable, an overdue rental and a fee the boys cannot pay, and a mother who must never find out. First episodes are mission statements, whether shows intend them or not, and Gumball's is almost comically honest in hindsight. No villain, no adventure, just a small domestic debt snowballing through pure panic into catastrophe in a town made of photographs. That's the show in miniature: ordinary stakes, cosmic escalation, real streets. It told you on night one that the danger in Elmore would always be life-sized, even when the explosions weren't. And since we're in the early seasons, this is the right place for a hidden fact about how soon the darkness actually started, because fans tend to remember the show's heavy era as a late development. Seasons 4 and 5 and 6, the famous experiments. The record says otherwise. The record says the show was smuggling genuinely heavy material past the censors from its very first year, and the proof is the dead girl in the corner of the classroom. Carrie Kruger is a ghost. That's her whole design, the floating, sighing, eye-rolling goth of Elmore Junior High. And in the 12th episode of Season 1, The Ghost, the show asked one quiet question about her existence that no other kid's cartoon would have touched. Carrie is dead, which means Carrie has no body, which means Carrie cannot eat, cannot taste, cannot feel any of the small physical pleasures that childhood is mostly made of. So she comes to an arrangement with Gumball. She borrows him. Possession, framed as a favor between classmates, and she takes his body on junk food rampages, eating everything in reach, at one point, famously, eating a flip-flop. While Gumball's health absorbs the damage, and the episode is explicit that he cannot bring himself to refuse her, because her hunger isn't for food, it's for being alive. A first-season episode of a silly cat cartoon built itself on the mechanics of a dependent, exploitative relationship. One party borrowing the other's body to feel something, the other too kind to set a boundary, and it aired as a comedy. And it is one, and it is also plainly something else. The show went back to Carrie a season later and raised the stakes from appetite to mortality. Halloween, the 9th episode of Season 2, broadcast on October 23, 2012, is the episode where Carrie, in a gesture of real friendship, offers the boys a night inside her world, a potion, one drop only. Gumball and Darwin ignore the dosage because of course they do. and the show turns them into actual ghosts, their bodies dropping empty while the boys float free, delighted. Because at first, death plays like a theme park, walls optional, gravity optional. Then the floor of the house opens into an enormous vortex that swallows the undead down into the afterlife. And the rules arrive, back in your bodies by midnight, or there is no back, ghosts forever, childhood over. The climax of a Halloween special on a children's network is two boys racing their own vacant bodies against a deadline over the open mouth of the hereafter. The hidden fact isn't any single image in these episodes, it's the date on them. This was the show in year 1 and year 2, already conducting the experiments everyone thinks it only dared later, already trusting children with weight that most primetime dramas handle with gloves. The famous late masterpieces didn't come from nowhere. The nerve was always in the building. Now, if the town is a photograph, what exactly is walking around inside the photograph? This is where Gumball's most famous creative decision lives, and even people who know the show well usually only know half of it. The cast of this show is not drawn in one style. It is not drawn in 5 styles. Nearly every character on screen belongs to a different medium, a different tradition, a different technology of image making, all sharing the same frames. Gumball and his family are flat, hand-drawn style digital animation. Tina, the Tyrannosaurus, and a number of other characters are full 3-dimensional computer models. Some characters are photographs of objects with faces on them. Some are stop-motion style constructions, some are puppets, and at least one of them is a piece of a live human being. That one deserves a full minute because it might be the strangest casting decision in modern animation. There is a character named Sussy, a background classmate who looks like a lumpy face with wild eyes and a gaping mouth. Sussy is not a drawing. Sussy is a human chin, filmed upside down. A real person, a French woman named Aurélie Charbonnier, lies down against a green screen with her head tilted back, her chin facing the camera, googly eyes attached, and the rest of her head hidden inside the character's costume body. The chin becomes the face. When Sussy talks, you are watching the underside of a real human jaw, inverted, composited into a cartoon middle school. And the credits split the role in a way almost no other show would need. For the early seasons, Charbonnier performed the chin, while a British comedian, Fergus Craig, provided Sussy's voice, and from season 5 onward, Charbonnier took over the voice as well, which means this character's filmography includes a chin performer and a separate voice actor, working in tandem for years to portray one gleefully deranged background student. There's even a small official artifact from the early days that's Suzy Completist's Treasure, a tiny short from 2012 called Chin Girl Laugh. Essentially a minute of Suzy being Suzy, and the credits of that little curio are their own joke, because the chin work is credited to Charbonnier while the production's own staff got roped into the character's madness, with the show's creator himself among the names attached to performing the role in that era. The most prestigious title in the building, creator of the series, and the man holding it spent part of a workday contributing to an upside-down chin. I flag the fine print of those credits as the kind of trivia preserved by databases rather than headlines. But the spirit of it is verifiable everywhere in the show itself. Nobody involved in this production considered any job beneath the bit. That's how you get a chin with a filmography. This is the level of commitment the show brings to its central joke, that nothing in Elmore matches and everything in Elmore belongs. Run down a single classroom and the inventory reads like a museum of every way humans have ever made images. A flat-drawn cat, a flat-drawn goldfish, a fully rendered 3-dimensional Tyrannosaurus Rex named Tina, towering over desks built for children a tenth her size, a robot, Bobert, who looks machined rather than drawn, a balloon, a paper bear, Terry, drawn on visible notebook paper, who has to be careful around water, a cloud, a banana, a potato, a ghost, a piece of toast, an upside-down chin with eyes. Some of them cast shadows in the photographed world and some don't quite, and the show simply never explains the rules because the lack of rules is the rule. The reading I'd offer, flagged as a reading, is that every kid in that classroom is a refugee from a different show that never got made, a different commercial, a different style guide, a different decade of animation. And Elmore Junior High is where they all ended up. The great public school of unused intellectual property, which is of course the rejects pitch again, fully operational, hiding in plain sight in every crowd shot. Boclet was told a school for rejected characters was too sad to air, so he aired it for 9 years with the sadness filed off, and the only people who ever noticed were the ones who learned the production history. Now you're one of them, and I promise the crowd shots never look the same again. And the deeper you look at the cast list, the more hidden machinery you find. Which brings us to the most human production fact of all, the one that shaped this show more than any network note ever did. The children kept growing up. Here is a problem that live-action television has, and animation usually doesn't. Your child actors age, their faces change, their bodies change, and above all, their voices change. Animation is supposed to be immune to this. A drawing stays 12 forever. But Gumball made a decision early on that quietly signed it up for the live-action problem. The show cast real children to voice the child characters, not adult women doing boy voices, which is the standard industry trick. The trick that kept Bart Simpson sounding 10 for over 3 decades, real boys. Which meant that the show's 2 leads came with built-in expiration dates, and everybody knew it, and they did it anyway because nothing sounds like an actual 12-year-old except an actual 12-year-old. So the casting history of this show reads like a relay race. In the beginning, Gumball was voiced by a boy named Logan Grove, and Darwin was voiced by Kwesi Boki. Those are the voices of seasons 1 and 2, the higher, squeakier, younger sound of the early show. By the time season 3 was in production, puberty had come for both of them. Their replacements were Jacob Hopkins as Gumball and Terrell Ransom Jr. as Darwin, who carried the roles through seasons 3 and 4. Then puberty came for them too. From partway through season 5 to the end of the original series, Gumball was Nicholas Cantu, and Darwin was Danielle Hansley Jr., and the show simply kept handing the baton down the line, recasting childhood itself every couple of seasons like a torch that burns through its runners. The contrast with the industry standard is worth one more beat, because it sharpens what this show chose. The standard exists for good reasons. Adult women have voiced cartoon boys for generations because adult voices are stable, schedulable, directable, insurable. The same performance available on demand for 30 years. It's the professionally correct choice, and nobody faults the institutions built on it. Gumball's choice, Real Boys, was professionally incorrect in every measurable way. Expensive, disruptive, guaranteed to force recasts on a schedule set by biology rather than by anyone's contract. What it bought, the only thing it bought, was truth. The specific, unfakeable timbre of an actual child. The cracks adult precision cannot manufacture. The energy of a performer who is the age of the part, and the show considered that trade worth making over and over. 4 generations of boys deep by the revival era. The hidden fact is that one of the silliest sounding shows on television was making one of the most expensive artistic commitments in its genre season after season, invisibly, in a place where almost no viewer would ever consciously notice. You weren't supposed to notice. You were supposed to believe the boy, and you did, and that belief was hand-built, biannually, at considerable inconvenience, by people who could have taken the standard shortcut and decided the sound of real childhood wasn't a corner worth cutting. Most shows would hide this. Most shows would make the swap between seasons, pray the audience didn't notice, and never speak of it. What Gumball did instead is one of my favorite hidden facts in all of television. The show wrote the puberty into the story, on screen, twice. The first episode of season 3 is called The Kids. It is the 77th episode of the series, and it exists, according to the people who made it, and to every guide that documents the show, for exactly one purpose: to explain why Gumball and Darwin suddenly sound different. The episode is built around the boys' voices beginning to crack. Gumball tries to sing, tries to talk his way through ordinary situations, and this new, broken, honking sound keeps falling out of his face. The whole episode is the two of them confronting the horror of growing up against their will, and it ends with the understanding that their voices are never going back. It was the final episode recorded with Logan Grove and Kwesi Boki in the roles, and the first episode where Jacob Hopkins and Terrell Ransom Jr. take over. The show staged the handoff in broad daylight. It turned a production necessity into an episode about mortality, about the fact that even a cartoon boy, even a drawing, cannot actually stay 12 forever if there's a real child underneath him. The drawing stays, the child goes. The Kids is the show admitting that out loud, and once you know what it is, it plays less like a comedy episode and more like a small, strange funeral for two voices. There's a poignancy to The Kids that sneaks up on you if you know anyone who's been 12. The episode's gags are all about the voice betraying the boy at the worst moments, mid-sentence, mid-song, mid-confession, and every adult watching has lived that betrayal, the morning your own instrument changed without permission. But the episode is also, secretly, about the two real boys in the recording booth. saying goodbye to roles they'd inhabited since before they could read the scripts fluently. Logan Grove and Kwesi Boki had grown up inside Gumball and Darwin the way kids grow up inside a house, and the show's farewell to them was to let their characters notice the walls moving. Listen to the episode knowing that, and the comedy develops an undertone you can't unhear. Two children performing, as fiction, the exact thing that was happening to them as people. In real time, take after take. Animation almost never lets reality in like that. This show held the door open. And then the show did it again, even more brazenly. Midway through season 5, there's an episode called The Copycats, which we will talk about properly later tonight because its main subject is one of the wildest stories in modern animation. But the ending matters here. At the very end of that episode, with no warning, Gumball and Darwin glitch on screen like a broken video file, and when the glitch passes, they are speaking with entirely new voices. That moment is the exact scene where Jacob Hopkins becomes Nicholas Cantu, and Terrell Ransom Jr. becomes Danielle Hansley Jr. The show didn't paper over the recast. It rendered it, visually, as a corruption in the signal, a skip in the tape. The fiction acknowledged the machinery for 1 second and then carried on as if nothing had happened. No other family cartoon was doing this. The voice change, the most awkward backstage event a show like this can suffer, became a punchline about the nature of the medium itself. I want to point out what this pattern suggests about the people making the show, and I'll mark this clearly as a reading rather than a fact. Most productions treat their seams as shameful. Gumball treated its seams as content, a show built from rejected characters walking through photographs of a real town, voiced by children who keep aging out of their roles, kept finding ways to make the artifice itself the joke. Nothing about how this show was made is hidden in the finished product, if you know where to look. The production history is printed on the screen. That is rare, and it is, I'd argue, the real reason adults kept watching a show aimed at children. It is a cartoon that constantly, quietly tells you the truth about what it is. Meanwhile, while the children kept cycling, the adults never changed. And the adult side of this cast list contains a fact that surprises almost everyone who learns it. The same woman voices both the mother and the girlfriend. Teresa Gallagher, a British voice actress, plays Nicole Watterson, the overworked, terrifying, endlessly loving mother who is widely considered the emotional anchor of the entire series. Teresa Gallagher also plays Penny, the shape-shifting fairy, who is the love of Gumball's young life. Mom and girlfriend, one throat. And she doesn't stop there. The credits put her behind Mrs. Robinson, behind Terry the Paper Bear, behind Polly, behind a whole roster of Elmore's women. Her counterpart Dan Russell does the same on the male side, anchoring Richard Watterson, the enormous pink rabbit father, while filling out background voices across the town. Two British adults essentially painted half the population of a Californian suburb. And the third constant deserves her own mention. Anais, the 4-year-old genius rabbit, the smartest member of the family, was voiced by Kyla Ray Kowalewski for the entire original run. While Gumball burned through 3 voices and Darwin burned through 3, Anais never changed. Every episode, all 6 seasons, one actress. There's a quiet irony in that, and the show's fans have pointed it out for years. The character whose whole identity is being ahead of her age was the only child character whose real-world performer never aged out. The youngest Watterson outlasted everyone. So hold the family in your head for a second, because as a piece of trivia architecture, it's almost elegant. The mother and the girlfriend share a voice. The father and half the town share a voice. The little sister is eternal. And the 2 boys at the center are a relay of real children, handing their characters to younger versions of themselves every time their bodies betray them. The show implies, through casting alone, a thesis about childhood, that it is a role you occupy temporarily and that someone else will play it after you. Nothing in the script states this. The cast list states it. Before we move on, there's one more name detail that belongs here because it's hiding in plain sight in the show's own dialogue. The boy you know as Gumball is not named Gumball. In the season 3 episode, The Name, the 7th episode of that season, the show reveals that his legal first name is Zach. Nicole and Richard named him Zach Watterson. The episode plays it as a crisis because Gumball discovers his own birth name and develops a sort of alternate personality around it. This smug, finger-gunning, deeply punchable version of himself called Zach, who starts overriding the Gumball we know. The episode literally treats his real name as a hostile entity that has to be defeated, and the resolution is wonderfully bureaucratic. At the end of the episode, the name is dealt with formally, and the show establishes that the boy is, from that point on, officially and legally Gumball. The nickname won. The birth certificate surrendered, and notice what the episode is actually about, Under the Gag. A name is the first story other people tell about you, chosen before you could object. And the name is an episode about a boy discovering that his founding document says someone he doesn't recognize. The Zack persona isn't played as a costume, it's played as a hostile takeover, an alternate self with a legal claim. And the resolution, paperwork, and official renaming is the show saying something quietly radical for its audience. That identity is not the name you were issued, it's the name you answer to, and you are allowed, with sufficient effort, and possibly a trip to City Hall, to correct the record. There are adults who need that episode more than children do. His brother's name goes even further, in the opposite direction. Darwin, the goldfish who grew legs and joined the family, has a full legal name that the show deployed early on like a comedy landmine. Darwin Raglan Caspian Ahab Poseidon, Nicodemus Watterson III. The third, a goldfish who started out as a household pet, carries a dynastic suffix, as if there were two previous Darwin Raglan Caspian Ahab Poseidon Nicodemus Wattersons before him, and fans have chewed on that suffix for years. The leading explanation among viewers, and I'll flag clearly that this is fan reasoning rather than anything the show has confirmed in detail, is that the Wattersons had two previous pet fish named Darwin who didn't make it, and that this Darwin, the one who sprouted legs the family loves, is simply the third fish to carry the name, which would mean the funniest name in the show is also, quietly, one of the darkest jokes in it, a child whose full legal name contains the fossil record of his own predecessors. Canonically, what we know for certain is the name itself, and the fact that the family treats it as completely normal. Everything else lives in that lovely gray space the show cultivates so carefully, where a joke is also a wound, depending on how long you look at it. Names, voices, photographs, rejects. You can already feel how much of this show's identity lives backstage. But the next fact isn't about something hidden inside the show, it's about something that happened to the show out in the real world on another continent. Because at some point in the 2010s, the amazing world of Gumball discovered that it had a double, a copy, a bootleg of itself airing in another country, wearing its face. And what the show did about it has no real precedent in television history. The double was called Miracle Star. It was a Chinese animated series, and to call it similar to Gumball undersells what happened. Miracle Star was funded as a marketing vehicle by a milk powder company called Sanyuan. And when clips of it reached the Western internet, Gumball fans experienced a kind of collective double take. The framing of shots was familiar, the layouts were familiar, the character poses, the comedic timing, the staging of entire scenes, familiar. The main family weren't cats and rabbits, the lead was a goat. But he lived in a Gumball-shaped world, in Gumball-shaped rooms, doing Gumball-shaped things, occasionally pausing to enjoy the sponsor's milk. Side-by-side comparison videos spread across the internet, lining up Miracle Star shots against the Gumball scenes they appeared to be traced from. And the resemblance was not the soft, deniable kind. It was the kind you could overlay. It's worth dwelling on how surreal this discovery was for the people who made the show. Imagine animating a scene in London, sweating its timing, its poses, its lighting, and then, a year or two later, watching that exact scene performed back at you by a goat in another language in service of milk powder. Plagiarism is usually an abstract injury, a legal concept. This was concrete, frame by frame, your own craftsmanship wearing someone else's face, monetized on the far side of the planet. Most studios, faced with that, get to feel angry in private. Animators uniquely have the tools to feel angry in public, at 24 drawings per second. Now, in the normal version of this story, what happens next is legal and invisible. Studios send letters, lawyers negotiate. The bootleg quietly disappears or quietly doesn't, and the audience never hears about any of it. That is how the industry handles plagiarism. Gumball did not do that, or at least not only that. Gumball wrote an episode. In the 11th episode of Season 5, called The Copycats, which aired in 2017, the Wattersons start noticing another family around Elmore. A family that follows them, mirrors them, repeats their actions a beat after they do them. A goat-led family of imitators whose entire existence consists of copying the Wattersons, move for move, and profiting from it. The episode is built joke by joke as a direct, unmistakable parody of Miracle Star, down to the design language of the knockoff family, and the show makes the source of the grievance impossible to miss for anyone who knew the controversy. The fake family in the episode even has its connection to selling milk. The episode escalates exactly the way you'd hope. The Wattersons, realizing they cannot reason with people whose whole being is imitation, decide the only way to defeat the copycats is to do things no copy would dare repeat. They begin performing increasingly dangerous, increasingly absurd stunts, daring their imitators to follow them into the fire. It becomes a duel between an original and its counterfeit, fought entirely in the language of slapstick. And the original wins, because the original can always go somewhere the copy cannot, which is anywhere new. One casting detail inside the copycats deserves its own asterisk because it might be the show's single most elegant inside joke. The knockoff family in the episode, the Chi-Chi clan, needed voices, and for the Goat family's mother, the production cast Teresa Gallagher. The same Teresa Gallagher who voices Nicole Watterson. The woman behind the real mother of the real family voices the counterfeit mother of the counterfeit family, the original performing her own imitation, and the joke runs deeper the longer you hold it, because it means the episode's entire war between authentic and copy is, at the audio layer, one actress on both sides of the battlefield, doing the genuine article and the bootleg in the same recording session. There is no way to watch the episode, know this, and not hear it as the show's final word on the whole plagiarism affair. You can trace our layouts, the casting says, you can copy our poses and our timing, but the soul of the thing was always the people. And the people, all of them, even your side's people, are ours. It's the most petty, most sophisticated flex in the series, buried in a credits list, waiting years for anyone to notice. And remember the hidden seam stitched into the end of this same episode. When it's all over, the Wattersons celebrate being unrepeatable, being one of a kind, and at that precise moment, the show glitches them into their new voice actors. The episode about the show being copied ends with the show recasting itself in front of you. The argument is right there if you want it, and I'll mark it as my reading. The Copycats is the series stating its whole philosophy in one breath. You can imitate our frames, but you cannot imitate our seams. Even our flaws are ours. A bootleg can copy what we did, it cannot copy what we are about to do, and it certainly cannot copy what it costs us to keep doing it, the growing children, the changing voices, the wear of being real. It is the single most confident half hour the show ever produced, and it was produced out of spite, which might be the most honest fuel in show business. What you should take from the Miracle Star affair is not just the comedy of it. It's what it reveals about Gumball's place in the world by the mid-2010s. You do not get bootlegged unless you matter. Counterfeiters do not counterfeit obscurities. Somewhere along the line, this odd little mixed media experiment from a London development studio had become valuable enough, recognizable enough, beloved enough, that a corporation on the other side of the planet found it worth wearing as a disguise to sell milk. The bootleg is, in its own backhanded way, the first major award the show ever won. The official trophies came too, and we'll count those later. But imitation came first, and imitation is the rawest data about what an audience actually wants. There's one more layer to the copycats worth filing, because the episode quietly performs a public service that lawyers never could. By building the parody so precisely, beat for beat, design for design, the show effectively documented the plagiarism inside its own canon, in a form no takedown can ever delete. Legal processes are slow, jurisdictional, and invisible to audiences, and bootlegs in distant markets often simply outlast anyone's appetite to fight them. But an episode is forever. The Copycats permanently entangled Miracle Star with its own theft, ensuring that every future viewer who discovers the bootleg will, within one search, discover the episode that mocks it, the parody now standing as the most famous thing about its target. The fan wikis tell the whole story side by side, the imitation and the retaliation is, of course, better made, funnier, and infinitely more loved, which is the cruelest available outcome for a copy. The hidden fact is that on-air revenge turned out to be a more durable enforcement mechanism than any cease and desist, and the show seemed to understand this because the episode doesn't read as angry, it reads as certain. The certainty of an original that has realized the copy's existence is, in the long run, just free advertising for the difference. And while one foreign studio was copying Gumball without permission, Gumball was quietly hiring other foreign studios, with permission, on purpose, to invade itself. This is one of the deepest cuts in the show's production history, the guest animator tradition. Because the series was already a collage of mediums, the crew realized it could absorb entire outside studios into single scenes, and almost nobody watching understood what they were looking at. The most famous case hides inside the final episode of Season 3, The Money, from 2015. An episode we should linger on anyway, because it might be the most formally audacious thing the show ever did. The plot is simple, the Wattersons are completely broke, and the only escape on offer is a payday for appearing in a commercial, which the family resists because selling out feels like death. And while they argue, the episode starts running out of budget. Not the family, the episode. The animation visibly degrades around them in documented stages. First, the characters freeze into rough, unfinished sketches over a glitching background. Then they drop to actual storyboards, the episode's real working storyboards, panel borders and all, then to thumbnail scribbles, and finally to crayon-grade doodles on sticky notes and printer paper. The entire show reduced to stick figures because, inside the fiction, nobody paid the animators. The fourth wall isn't broken so much as repossessed. And the joke runs in the other direction too, because earlier in that same episode there's a lavish, fully animated Japanese-style commercial sequence featuring Nicole. And that sequence was genuinely produced by an outside Japanese animation company, a real studio called Mont Blanc Pictures, contracted to animate a fake advert inside an episode about the cost of animation. The show paid real foreign animators to make the fake commercial, then bankrupted its own visuals on screen for the finale. There are film school lectures with less to say about money and art than these 11 minutes of a children's cartoon. And the audience agreed. The episode sits at 9.2 on IMDb, among the show's most celebrated. But the crown jewel of the guest tradition is a Season 4 episode called The Fury, from 2016, and this one is a gift to animation fans that most of them haven't unwrapped. The episode finally explains Nicole's lifelong rivalry with Yuki Yoshida, the mother of Cloud Girl Masami, and the backstory is pure martial arts cinema. Two childhood best friends, prodigies training side by side, forced to fight each other in a final tournament. Nicole winning on the strength of her temper, Yuki leaving for Japan with a grudge and a training montage, returning decades later to settle it. And when the two mothers finally collide, the show does the single most extravagant thing in its stylistic arsenal. It becomes an anime. Properly. The fight between Nicole and Yuki plays out in full Japanese action animation, and the sequence was outsourced, for real, to one of the most celebrated animation houses on the planet, the Tokyo studio known as Studio 4 Degrees Celsius, the people behind acclaimed feature films and some of the most inventive animation of the era. The records note they were the 5th outside animation team the show had brought in by that point, which is the real hidden fact. This wasn't a stunt, it was a policy. The show treated guest studios the way it treated chins and photographs and puppets, as one more material the world of Elmore could legitimately be made of. Two suburban moms throw down in a parking lot, and for 90 seconds a children's network was airing bespoke animation from a legendary Japanese studio, and the show never put up a sign telling anyone to be impressed. It just did it and moved on like Elmore weather. A footnote on the Yoshida family makes the episode even better. Yuki's daughter is Masami, the Cloud Girl, the classroom's resident spoiled princess, the kid whose every appearance announces money and entitlement. And the episode quietly explains her whole deal in retrospect. Masami's wealth, her imperiousness, her armored little personality, all of it sits downstream of a mother who built an empire out of a grudge, who answered childhood defeat with decades of accumulation. And the show lets you connect those dots yourself, the way it always does, no speech, no underline, just a family suddenly legible once you've seen the parent's wound. That's the hidden fact about the hidden fact. The guest animated showpiece fight is also, structurally, an origin story for a background child's personality. And it's typical of this production that it would spend its most expensive sequence of the season explaining, without ever saying so, why a cloud is mean. Other shows explain their main cast. This one carried full psychological continuity for the people at the edge of the room, and budgeted accordingly and never once asked for credit. So now you can add that to the pile. This show subcontracted its dream sequences to world-class studios on multiple continents, parodied its plagiarists on air, and once spent the climax of a season finale animated on sticky notes for thematic reasons. Keep all of that in mind as we head back into the mythology, because the same fearlessness is about to show up in the storytelling itself. And if you want the purest demonstration of that storytelling fearlessness, there's an episode from Season 5 that almost nobody files under experiments because it's too funny to look like one. The Test, the 8th episode of Season 5, broadcast in 2016, and the hidden fact inside it is that this children's comedy quietly produced one of television's sharpest essays about television. The premise starts microscopic. Gumball takes a throwaway internet personality quiz, the kind that promises to tell you which character you are, and the quiz processes the sum of his observable life, the schemes, the vanity, the spectacular failure rate, and returns a verdict. He's the loser, the sitcom loser, the character whose suffering exists to be laughed at. And Gumball, wounded in the exact place where he keeps his self-image, decides to fight the diagnosis by simply refusing to be funny anymore. No more schemes, no more sarcasm, no more comedy. And the universe of the show responds with the most chilling mechanic in its entire rulebook. It recasts him. With the protagonist refusing to generate entertainment, reality migrates to the loudest available substitute. Tobias, the rainbow kid with bottomless misplaced confidence, and the world physically reformats itself around its new star into a cheap, multi-camera sitcom, complete with a laugh track. Not a stylistic flourish, a diegetic laugh track audible to the characters, baked into the air of Elmore, roaring at Tobias's terrible jokes, and the worse the jokes get, the louder it laughs, this dead, automated approval grinding over every scene like weather, while the cast visibly suffers inside it. There's a moment fans treasure where Sarah, the ice cream superfan girl, gets so desperate to stop the format that she physically hurls an instrument at the unseen source of the sentimental music, a character attacking the soundtrack. The show had broken its fourth wall plenty of times before, but The Test does something stranger. It weaponizes the wall, makes the format itself the antagonist, and lets the characters fight their own genre on screen. The resolution is the quietly devastating part, and it's why this episode belongs among the hidden greats. Gumball takes his role back, not triumphantly, resignedly. He returns to being the joke because a world formatted around someone else's worst comedy is unbearable, and because the role, however insulting the quiz made it sound, is his. Read it as a reading. Mine, clearly flagged, and the test becomes the show's confession about every character in it, that nobody in Elmore chose their part, that the format assigns roles the way the universe assigns bodies, and that dignity in a sitcom or anywhere else is not escaping your role, it's playing it on purpose. Keep that idea close tonight because the show's entire endgame, the part we're heading toward, is about the one character who got assigned the worst role of all and what he did about it. So now you know how the show was born, where it lives, what it's made of, who speaks through it, and who tried to steal its face. It's time to go back to the promise I made at the start of tonight, back to the pile of rejects. Because the show, at the height of its powers, built a place inside its own universe where everything we've discussed tonight, the rejected designs, the discarded ideas, the things deemed not good enough, physically goes. The show gave its own production history a location, with geography and weather and inhabitants. And then it sent the main characters there. The episode is called The Void, and it is the 12th episode of Season 3. The premise begins small, almost as a riddle. There is a student at Elmore Junior High named Molly, a sauropod dinosaur girl, gentle, pleasant, and by the show's own merciless assessment, boring. One day, Molly is simply not there. Not absent, erased. Her locker belongs to no one. Her photos are empty. And here is the detail that elevates the episode from weird to quietly horrifying. Nobody remembers her. The world has closed seamlessly over the hole where a person used to be, the way water closes over a stone. Only Gumball, Darwin, and eventually the school counselor Mr. Small retain any flicker of her existence, and the adults around them treat that flicker like a glitch in the children rather than a wound in the world. The investigation leads them to the truth that defines the show's entire cosmology. The universe of Elmore has a built-in garbage disposal, a dimension where the world's mistakes are deposited. The episode calls it The Void, and when Gumball, Darwin, and Mr. Small drive into it to rescue Molly, the show gets to display, with disturbing relish, what the inside of a universe's recycle bin looks like. Floating in that white nothing are the things reality decided not to keep. Failed inventions, abandoned fads, embarrassments of history, and crucially for tonight, things that look suspiciously like production artifacts of the show itself. Sharp-eyed viewers and the show's own wiki have cataloged what drifts in there, and among the debris is a rejected early design of the Watterson family's house, an alternate version of the very set you've been watching all series, floating in the trash dimension like a deleted file. The show put its own cutting room floor on screen and called it a place. Stay in the white a moment longer because the place rewards slow looking and you're in no hurry tonight. The void has no floor and no horizon. Things don't sit in it. They drift, gently, the way dust drifts in a sunbeam. Except the sunbeam is infinite, and the dust is everything a world was ashamed of. The boys drive through it in Mr. Small's van the way you drive through fog, and shapes loom up out of the blankness and slide past. An abandoned craze here, a discontinued product there. History's embarrassments hung in the air like exhibits with no museum around them. There's no menace in any individual object. That's what gets under your skin. Nothing in the void wants to hurt you. The void doesn't want anything. It's the absence of wanting, the place where the universe stopped caring, given a zip code, and the show renders it with a softness, all that white, all that quiet, that feels less like hell and more like a hospital for things nobody visits. Let that settle for a second because the implication runs deeper than a clever background gag. Within the fiction, the void is where the universe sends its mistakes, the people and things it judges to be errors, the boring, the broken, the unwanted. Behind the camera, a show is a machine that does exactly this constantly. Every series ever made has a void, a folder of rejected designs, cut characters, abandoned drafts. Gumball, the show built from rejected characters, the show whose creator was told his reject school idea was too sad, made that folder canon. The void is the remedial school Pitch, returned from the dead, wearing horror movie clothes. The sad idea the network refused in 2008 didn't die. It moved into the basement of the show that replaced it, and it waited there until season 3. And the episode commits to the horror with a coldness that still startles first-time viewers. Molly is rescued, pulled back into reality, but her memory of the whole ordeal is wiped in the process. She does not get to know what happened to her, that her world judged her disposable, that 3 people noticed and came for her. The world that deleted a girl for being boring gets to keep its secret, and the girl goes back to her locker none the wiser. The show does not linger on this, does not underline it, and that refusal to linger is the scariest thing in the episode. In Elmore, erasure isn't an event, it's a utility. It hums along in the background like plumbing. And Molly's memory wipe deserves its own quiet minute in the ledger because the show made a choice there that it never walked back. The kindest fact of Molly's life, that she was missed, that 3 people crossed a dimension for her, is permanently sealed away from the one person it's about. Gumball and Darwin carry it for her, and the series, across all its remaining seasons, never has them tell her. Never stages the scene where she learns what she survived and what she meant. From one angle that's mercy, she gets to live unhaunted. From another, it's the quietest injustice in the whole cosmology, a person walking around with the proof of her own worth held in trust by others, undeliverable, and the show implies, through its silence, that this is simply how the universe's filing system works, that restoration and awareness are mutually exclusive, that you can be saved or you can know you were saved, never both. Fans have long wished for the scene where someone finally tells her. The show never shot it. File that under the production's discipline one more time, because a lesser series would have cached that scene for easy tears within a season. This one understood that the untold version is heavier and that some gifts do their work best as secrets, and it sat on the secret for the rest of its run. One more figure floats through that white nothing, and most viewers missed him completely on first watch. Drifting among the wreckage of the void, near that rejected house design, there is a person. A background student who had quietly vanished from the show after its early seasons, a blue Cyclops kid that almost nobody in the audience had ever consciously registered. His name is Rob. In the void, he is a cameo, a piece of human debris glimpsed in passing, one more thing the universe threw away. The episode does not stop for him. Gumball and Darwin are there for Molly, and they leave with Molly, and the door closes. But the show was planting something. That throwaway glimpse becomes, over the following seasons, the spine of the entire series' endgame because the boy abandoned in the trash dimension eventually gets out. And he gets out wrong, and he gets out angry, and what the show builds on top of that anger is its most ambitious storyline, its finale, and its strangest casting story. We'll meet him properly a little later tonight because one of the people connected to that storyline is among the most distinguished actors ever to walk into a cartoon recording booth. Before we get there, though, this is a good moment to breathe and to look at the gentler side of the ledger, because everything tonight so far has been rejection, erasure, bootlegs, and the slow grinding of puberty. And if that were the whole story, Gumball would be a curiosity, a clever machine. The reason it is more than that, the reason millions of people who watched it as kids now rank it among the great animated series, is a handful of episodes where all the cleverness suddenly points inward, at something true about families. And the purest of those, the one fans and critics consistently hold up as the show's masterpiece, is a Season 4 episode about the mother, a supermarket, and the roads a person doesn't take. The episode is called The Choices, and it aired in 2016 during Season 4. On paper, its premise is almost nothing. Nicole Watterson, the mother, is at the supermarket, and a small, ordinary moment sends her mind backward into her own past, into the chain of decisions that led her from being a young girl with her whole life open in front of her to being a tired woman, buying groceries for a chaotic family in a dead-end town. The episode then does something this show had never done at such length. It stops being a comedy. It walks Nicole's memory and ours through the hinge points of her life. Her childhood under crushing parental expectations. The day she met a ridiculous, soft, kind boy named Richard. The versions of her life that would have unspooled if she had turned left instead of right at each of those hinges, if she had chosen ambition or escape or solitude instead of this family. The flashback structure matters because of how patiently it's built. We see the child Nicole drilled toward excellence by parents who measured love in achievement, who treated every result as a down payment on a better one. And we see the precise moment the machine of her childhood meets the absurd, gentle, completely unambitious boy who will derail it. Richard isn't presented as a prize. That's the episode's honesty. He's presented as a door out of one kind of pressure and into another kind of life entirely. And the young Nicole walks through it knowing on some level what it costs, the way you always half know at the time and fully know later in a supermarket decades on. And the episode's quiet thesis, the thing that wrecks people, is that the alternate lives are not presented as tragedies she avoided. Some of them glitter. Some of them are objectively bigger lives than the one she has. The episode is honest in a way family cartoons essentially never are. That choosing love costs something, that Nicole gave up real futures, and that on a bad day in a supermarket, a person can feel every one of those ghosts standing in the aisle with her. What the episode ultimately lands on, the image it chooses to end on, is Nicole looking at the life she did choose. The loud, broke, ridiculous family, and choosing it again, not because the alternatives were worse, but because this one is hers. There is no irony in the ending. The show that mocks everything declines for once to mock this. Here's the hidden fact attached to it. On IMDb, the largest film and television rating database in the world, The Choices stands at a rating of 9.8 out of 10, which places it not just at the summit of Gumball's own catalog, but among the highest rated episodes of television animation on the entire platform. A children's cartoon episode about a middle-aged woman's regret, with barely a proper joke in it, outscores almost everything its own genre ever produced. The audience, in other words, ratified the gamble. The crew took the show's least flashy character resource, a parent's interior life, and bet an entire episode on it. And that bet is now the most acclaimed thing the series ever made. And I want to mark a reading here because The Choices retroactively explain something about the whole series. Nicole Watterson had for seasons been the show's most quietly detailed character. The temper, the competence, the exhaustion, the flashes of a former life, a former fighter, a former prodigy, all buried under laundry and bills. Fans had long theorized that the show was sitting on a Nicole backstory, and when it finally came, it came not as lore, not as a plot reveal, but as a meditation. The show implies, through this episode, what it believes about all its adults, that every parent in Elmore is a person who once had other doors open, and that the comedy of the show floats on top of those closed doors the way Elmore floats on top of photographs of a real, ordinary, unglamorous town. The saddest pitch in the building always finds a way back in. The reject school, the void, the supermarket. It is the same idea wearing three costumes, the idea that every world is built out of the versions of itself it didn't keep. And the show did something with Nicole's story that almost no animated comedy has ever attempted. It honored the continuity of the wound. 2 seasons after The Choices, in the 16th episode of Season 6, an episode called The Parents, the ghosts from that supermarket reverie acquire faces and walk into the present. Nicole, mid-errand, runs into her mother and father. Daniel and Mary Senecourt, the architects of the crushing childhood the flashbacks showed us, estranged from their daughter for so long that Gumball, Darwin, and Anais did not know their grandparents existed. Sit with that hidden fact on its own for a second. The show established canonically that Nicole's rupture with her parents was so total that her children had never heard of them. That's not a sitcom estrangement. That's the real kind. The episode then conducts the reunion with a patience that earns it a place among the show's heaviest hours. The Senecourts are not cartoon monsters. That's the discomfort the episode insists on. They're polished, pleasant, plausible people who say out loud that everything they did, the pressure, the demands, the conditional warmth, was for Nicole's own good. And the episode gives Nicole the scene that real estrangements almost never get. The full accounting, point by point, decades of grievance finally said to the people who caused them in a family kitchen in front of her kids. They never approved of Richard. They vanished from her life. They missed her wedding, and when that last wound comes out, their explanation is so small and human and absurd that it lands worse than cruelty would. They misread the invitation. Decades of silence resting partly on a misread card. The reconciliation that eventually arrives comes the way everything important in this show arrives. Through a song, the children forcing the adults to feel in public, and it lands as something rarer than a happy ending. A cautious agreement between three adults to stop hemorrhaging time. The hidden fact, the structural one, is what this episode proves about the show's memory. The Choices was not a standalone gem. It was a deposit, and The Parents is the withdrawal. 2 seasons later, same continuity, same wounds, same parents, aged and answerable. Gag cartoons are not supposed to do this. The format runs on amnesia. We've talked about that all night, and yet here's the show keeping a mother's heartbreak on file for 2 full seasons, and then paying it off with interest on a children's network in the middle of the afternoon. The series that built a literal forgetting machine into its cosmology was, behind the scenes, one of the most stubbornly remembering shows of its era. The contradiction is the signature. Elmore forgets. Gumball never did. If you're enjoying this, by the way, this is a good moment to mention, gently, that subscribing genuinely helps this channel keep making videos this long and this researched. And if you're already half asleep, don't worry about any of it. Stay where you are. There's a lot of night left. Now, I promised you a distinguished actor inside a Cyclops, and it's time to pay that off, because this might be the single least known fact we cover tonight, even among devoted fans. To set it up, you need the short version of a story we'll trace fully in the back half of tonight, the story of Rob, the boy from the void. After his blink and you miss it cameo in the trash dimension, Rob claws his way back into the show in late season 3. Escaping the void physically changed, his body corrupted and glitching, his memory gone. Over the following episodes, he decides that if the world has cast him as a nobody, he will audition for a better role. And the role he chooses is villain. Gumball's villain, his arch nemesis. The show then spends 3 seasons turning that joke premise into the most serious storyline it has. But the part that belongs in tonight's list of hidden facts is what happened in the recording booth. In the season 4 episode The Nemesis, the second episode of that season, Rob's villain career is going so badly that Gumball and Darwin, out of something between pity and boredom, decide to help him become a proper antagonist. They coach him, they equip him, and in the episode's most fateful gag, they modify his voice, giving him a deep, theatrical, menacing British timbre, because every great villain needs one. It's a joke about villain cliches, but the production backed that joke with real money because the deep British villain voice that comes out of Rob from that point onward belonged to David Warner. Pause on how this looks from inside the fiction, because the layers stack beautifully. In the story, a 12-year-old changes his enemy's voice as a productivity tip. Outside the story, a casting director then has to actually go and secure a voice worthy of the joke. And the production's answer to the question, what does a child think the scariest voice in the world sounds like, was to hire the man who had spent half a century being the scariest voice in the world. If that name doesn't immediately land, here is who David Warner was. One of the great British character actors of the 20th century. The man who played the villainous evil genius in Time Bandits, the sinister valet in Titanic, Jack the Ripper in Time After Time, the voice of Ra's al Ghul in the celebrated Batman animated series of the 90s. A Shakespearean actor, a Hamlet of his generation on the English stage, that David Warner. When Gumball jokingly upgrades his enemy's voice into aristocratic menace, the show actually hired one of cinema's most storied villain voices to be the upgrade. Warner voiced Rob through the heart of the villain arc, from the Nemesis through the season 4 finale The Disaster, and the show's own lore tracks the joke with perfect bookkeeping. When Rob later resets his own voice using a magical remote control, the British accent vanishes, and his regular voice, performed by Charles Phillip, returns. The casting itself was a punchline with a budget, and there's a second, stranger casting story waiting at the very end of the series. Same character, opposite direction. In the final episode of the entire original run, the Season 6 finale, The Inquisition, which was the 240th episode and aired on June 24, 2019, the children of Elmore are menaced by a new school superintendent, a human being, played not by a drawing, not by a puppet, but by a live-action actor walking through the cartoon world. His name in the credits is Garrick Hagon, and film fans know his face from one of the most famous small roles in cinema history. Garrick Hagon played Biggs Darklighter, Luke Skywalker's doomed friend in the original Star Wars. The superintendent, of course, turns out to be Rob in disguise, which means this one cartoon Cyclops, this background nobody from a children's show, has been performed across his life by a Shakespearean screen legend and a Star Wars pilot. No character in animation has a stranger acting lineage, and almost nobody knows it. And the Hagon casting carries one more layer for the film literate, because of which Star Wars role he carried into that recording booth. Biggs Darklighter is not just any small part. Biggs is the famous ghost of the original Star Wars, the childhood best friend whose scenes were largely cut, the character audiences mostly know from his death, the loyal wingman who exists in the final film as a fragment, beloved out of all proportion to his screen time, the patron saint, in other words, of characters the edit left behind. And Gumball, the show whose entire finale is about a boy the narrative discarded, reached out and cast as its final threat the actor most famous for being discarded by the most famous edit in cinema history. Nothing official confirms the production chose him for the symmetry, so file the connection as the kind of thing that is either a coincidence or a curator's joke. But this show has earned the benefit of the doubt on its deep cuts 100 times over, and even as pure accident, it's perfect. The man inside the superintendent's suit knew, professionally, personally, exactly what it is to be a face the story couldn't find room for. Whether anyone planned it or not, the finale's villain costume came pre-haunted. The fact that the show cast its finale's threat as a live-action human matters thematically too, and we'll sit with that properly when we walk the whole ending later tonight. A cartoon about cartoons chose for its last enemy the real world itself, a flesh and blood man sent to stamp out cartoonishness. Keep that in your pocket. It's the key to the finale and to the cliffhanger that kept fans awake for 6 years. But before the ending, let's count the trophies, because the show's official honors are their own kind of hidden fact. Audiences tend to remember Gumball as a cult favorite, the internet's cartoon, beloved in clips and memes. What's less known is how decorated it actually is. Across its run, the franchise accumulated, by the Tally's entertainment database's keep, around 38 award wins, and the shelf is not filled with obscurities. There are BAFTA Children's Awards on it, the British Academy honoring the homegrown production. There is an Annie Award, the animation industry's own prize, voted by the people who actually make cartoons. There is an International Emmy. There are British Animation Awards and Kids Screen Awards, and honors from festivals across Europe. For a show born from a folder of rejected commercial characters, pitched by a man whose job was polishing other people's pitches, the trophy case reads like a long, slow apology from the industry that had said no to every single one of those characters individually. Collectively, it turned out they were award-winning. They just needed to be rejected together. Take those 3 trophies one at a time, because each one certifies something different. A BAFTA Children's Award is the home country's verdict, the British Academy recognizing a production built in London, staffed from its own industry, as the best of what that industry makes. An Annie Award is the peers' verdict, voted by animation professionals, the people who can see the seams and the rigging and know exactly how hard every effortless-looking minute actually is, which makes it the prize least fooled by charm and most moved by craft. And an International Emmy is the world's verdict, recognition that the show traveled, that a comedy assembled from a folder of rejected British commercial mascots and photographs of a Californian suburb played, and won, globally, home, peers, world. 3 constituencies that famously never agree on anything, agreeing about this repeatedly across the better part of a decade. The hidden fact inside the trophy case isn't the number, it's the coverage. Almost any show can win somewhere. The ones that win everywhere are the ones doing something underneath the genre, and by now, tonight, you know exactly what this one was doing under there. Here's a structural secret most casual viewers never clock, and it hides inside the show's love story. For 2.5 seasons, Gumball's crush, Penny Fitzgerald, is a peanut. A cute, antlered peanut girl in a shell, sweet on Gumball, never quite getting together with him, in the way cartoon crushes are required to orbit forever without landing. Sitcom logic says that status quo is sacred. The girl stays the girl next door, the crush stays unconsummated, the shell stays on. Shows ride those rails for decades. And then, in season 3, in an episode called The Shell, Gumball accidentally cracks Penny's shell, and the show does the thing shows are never supposed to do. It opens the box. Penny comes out, and she is not a peanut. She never was. Inside the shell is a glowing, shape-shifting creature, a kind of fairy whose body transforms with her emotions, who had spent her whole childhood hidden inside a husk, because her family taught her the world should never see what she really is. Stay inside the moment of the crack for a second, because the staging is everything. The shell doesn't shatter dramatically. It breaks the way accidents actually happen, small, stupid, instantly irreversible. And what emerges isn't revealed in a triumphant flourish. It emerges scared. The first thing Penny's true form does on screen is try to manage the people looking at her, and the episode understands, the way very few shows for any age understand, that the terror being seen is rarely about what you are. It's about the half second before the verdict, the silence where the other person's face is deciding. The episode plays the reveal not as a twist, but as a coming out, in the broadest, warmest sense of that phrase. Penny's terror isn't that she's a monster, it's that her own family treats her true form as something to keep contained. And Gumball's response, which is the reason this episode is held up by fans as one of the show's finest hours, is uncomplicated delight. He likes her more. The crush becomes a couple, on screen permanently. The show broke its own sitcom physics, retired one of its core character designs, and let its romance actually progress in the middle of season 3 of a gag cartoon. That almost never happens in this genre, and the production knew exactly how big a door it was opening, because the shell never comes back. There's no reset button episode. From that day to the end of the series, Penny is the shapeshifter, and the peanut design, the original Penny, the one from all the early merchandise and the title sequence, goes wherever retired designs go in this show. You already know the name of that place. And tucked inside this love story is the casting fact from earlier tonight, now with its full weight. Teresa Gallagher voices both Penny and Nicole, which means that when the show's two emotional poles speak, the mother who chose her family over every other life, and the girl who was finally allowed out of her shell, it is one actress, holding both ends of the show's whole argument about love, that love is the thing you choose at cost and the thing that lets you be seen. I'll flag that connection as my reading, not the show's stated intent. But the voice is a fact, and once you hear it, the show's heart has a single sound. Now let me hand you one of the strangest background details in the entire series, one the show hid in plain sight for years before weaponizing it. There's a character in Elmore named Banana Barbara. She's Banana Joe's mother, a banana woman, a background presence, the kind of character you'd swear had never done anything important in 200 episodes. Barbara paints. That's her thing. In her appearances, you'll often find her at an easel, producing canvases, and for a long time the paintings read as set dressing, the hobby of a minor character in a show stuffed with minor characters. Here's the fact. Barbara's paintings come true. The show eventually makes it explicit canon that this background banana housewife is a prophet, that what she paints happens, that scattered through the series, hanging quietly on walls in shots nobody was supposed to study, were canvases depicting events of episodes before they occurred. When the show entered its endgame in season 6, it pulled this thread into the foreground. In the episode The Future, the 34th episode of season 6, Banana Barbara finishes a painting, hangs it beside her others, and realizes the new canvas shows herself hanging that very painting, with a dark figure standing behind her. She turns around. The figure is there. It's Rob, the Cyclops from the Void, and he kidnaps her because he has understood what the audience is understanding in the same moment. Her paintings don't predict the future. In this universe's grammar, they decide it. Whoever holds the painter edits the world. The episode then commits fully to its premise. Rob attempts to use Barbara's power to redraw reality. Gumball and his friends literally fall into the middle of the scheme, and the fight that follows is a fight over authorship, over who gets to paint what happens next. We'll deal with what Rob saw in those paintings and what it did to him when we walk the finale. because it reframes the entire ending of the series. But as a piece of construction, stand back and admire what the show did here. It planted a gag character in the background of its world, let her paint quietly for years, established the paintings as a running joke at most, and then revealed that she had been the show's pencil all along. The show implies, through Barbara, a theology for itself. Elmore is a drawn world, and somewhere inside it, something is doing the drawing, and the characters can get their hands on the instrument if they're desperate enough. The children's comedy spent 6 seasons quietly building an argument about authorship, and hid the author inside a banana. Go back if you ever rewatch the series and look for her. That's the assignment this fact leaves you with, and it changes the texture of old episodes completely. Barbara at her easel in the background of a crowd scene stops being set dressing and becomes a countdown. What's on the canvas, whether you can make it out, whether the thing on the canvas has happened yet. The show buried a live wire in its own wallpaper years before revealing the current. And the bravery of that, the willingness to plant something enormous and just trust it to wait, is the same bravery as the Rob cameo in The Void, the same bravery as the hidden basement. This production thought in years, on a network that thought in weeks. Fans, naturally, have gone further. There is a long-running theory in the community, and I'll flag it clearly as theory, nothing official confirms it, that Barbara's gift is the show acknowledging its own storyboard artists, that she is a self-portrait of the production smuggled into the cast the way The Void is the cutting room floor smuggled into the cosmology. The show has never said so. What the show has said in canon is enough on its own. The future of Elmore exists as paintings before it exists as events. In a series made of photographs of a real town, the future is the one thing that's handmade. And while we're collecting the show's strangest canonical machinery, here's one more. The device that links the show's silliest era to its darkest. Go back to the end of season 2, to an episode called The Finale, the 40th episode of that season. The title was a joke. It wasn't the finale of anything. The show had 4 seasons left. The premise is that every consequence the Wattersons have ever skipped catches up with them in one day. Every building Richard destroyed, every law broken, every bill unpaid, every neighbor wronged, all of it arrives at once. Lawsuits stack up. The town turns on them. It escalates, with the show's signature refusal to flinch, all the way to an angry mob physically breaking into the Watterson home. And the episode ends, and I want to be precise here because the ending is genuinely shocking. With the family cornered under the assault, Nicole declaring that this is the end of the Wattersons, and Gumball looking into the chaos, observing that the only thing that could save them now would be for reality itself to be completely reset by some kind of magic device. And then the episode just stops, cut to black. No reset shown. Next episode, everything is normal again, and the show never explains because the joke is precisely that cartoons get to do this. Wipe the slate weekly, no questions asked, except 4 seasons later, the show introduces an actual magic device that actually resets reality. Rob's universal remote, the weapon at the center of the season 4 finale The Disaster, and its second part, the rerun, both of which aired on September 5th, 2016, is a literal handheld machine that rewinds, fast forwards, and rewrites the world. And the fan community noticed the rhyme immediately. The theory, and it remains a theory, the show has never confirmed the link on screen, is that the finale's cut to black was always meant to be answered, that somewhere in the show's loose, gleeful continuity, a reality reset really did occur, and that the universal remote is the same class of object Gumball was praying for with the mob at the door. Whether the writers planned the echo or simply arrived at the same idea twice, what's certain in canon is this. In Elmore, the reset button physically exists. The thing every cartoon relies on invisibly, this show eventually drew, named, and put in the hands of its angriest character. Gumball doesn't just use cartoon logic, it keeps taking cartoon logic out of the walls and showing you the wiring, and every time it does, the comedy gets a little closer to philosophy. While we're on the subject of machinery, one more hidden engine deserves credit, the humble 11-minute runtime itself. Gumball episodes are short, half the length of a standard sitcom slot, and the format is usually discussed, when it's discussed at all, as a scheduling convenience. Watch enough of this show and you realize the brevity was a creative weapon. 11 minutes is too short for subplots, too short for padding, too short for the obligatory scenes that bloat longer comedies, which means every episode had to be one idea executed at maximum density, and the discipline that enforced shows up everywhere we've walked tonight. The choices is 11 minutes because regret doesn't need a B story. The joy is 11 minutes because outbreaks don't pause for subplots. The format made the experiments affordable too. And this is the production insight hiding inside it. A strange gamble that fails at 11 minutes costs the schedule almost nothing, which is precisely why the network kept letting this show take swings, anime fights, puppet horror, animation that dissolves into sticky notes that a half-hour series would have had to argue for in meetings. Short episodes meant cheap risks. Cheap risks meant constant experiments, and constant experiments compounded across 240 episodes meant a show that evolved faster than anything airing beside it. The runtime looked like a limitation. It was a laboratory license, renewed 11 minutes at a time. Before we move into the long final act of tonight, the endgame, the cancellation, the cliffhanger, the resurrection, take a moment, settle deeper into wherever you are. If the lights are still on, you have my permission to give up on them. The rest of tonight is one continuous story, and it's the best one the show ever told. The story of how a children's gag cartoon spent its last years quietly assembling a serialized myth about its least important character and then ended on him, mid-fall, and went silent for 6 years. But a story like that needs its supporting cast in place. So let's quickly gather the remaining family secrets, because each Watterson carries at least one hidden fact worth knowing, and one of them is holding up the entire universe. Start with Darwin, because his existence is the show's gentlest piece of impossible lore. Darwin was a pet, a goldfish acquired the way goldfish are acquired, and the show waited until season 4 to actually dramatize the event that everyone in Elmore treats as ordinary history, the day the fish became a son. It did so in The Origins, a 2-part episode, the 20th and 21st episodes of season 4, and the production note here is that this was the first time in its entire run the show told a single story across 2 episodes. The format broke for Darwin. The story the 2-parter tells is simple and quietly devastating. Through a chain of accidents and misunderstandings, the young Gumball and his pet fish are separated, and the fish crosses an absurd, enormous distance to get back to him, traveling deserts and valleys, singing to himself as he goes. Somewhere on that journey, off-screen, in the space between shots, the impossible thing happens. The fish grows legs. The show has always been plain about the mechanism in its own fairy tale way. Darwin's legs are not a mutation or a joke about evolution, whatever his name winks at. The show presents it, and the characters repeat it, as a transformation powered by attachment, a body rewriting itself because the love was load-bearing. Read the 2-parter that way, and the silliest member of the family becomes the show's entire thesis in one creature. In a world built from rejected designs, the way you become real, the way you upgrade from prop to person, is that somebody refuses to let go of you. The fish walked out of the pet store category and into the family because Gumball wanted him back that badly. That's the lore, a whole personhood grown from missing someone. Anaïs's hidden fact is smaller and stranger. She is 4 years old. It's easy to forget because she functions as the family's only adult, the strategist, the one who reads the fine print of reality while her older brothers eat it. The show states her age and then spends 6 seasons mining the gap between that number and her function. She skipped grades into middle school. She dismantles every scheme in the house with the weariness of a tax auditor. And the production mirror of that gap is the fact from earlier tonight that while every boy in the cast aged out of his role, the 4-year-old's actress Kyla Ray Kowalewski never changed across the entire original run. The most precocious character was the most stable element in the building. Fans have also long cherished the one crack in Anaïs's armor, her obsessive devotion to a children's franchise called Daisy the Donkey, a plush, saccharine kiddie show mascot she loves, with a ferocity that has fueled entire episodes. The genius's one weakness is the exact media product her intellect should have outgrown years ago. The show implies, gently, that this is the 4-year-old leaking through, the actual child under the prodigy, clinging to one age-appropriate thing while her brain lives decades ahead. It's the same gap joke, run in reverse, and it's the most human thing about her. And then there is Richard, Father Rabbit, a man whose entire characterization is that he has never meaningfully worked a day in his life. The hidden fact attached to Richard is, canonically, one of the load-bearing rules of the show's universe. And it was established all the way back in season 2 in the 8th episode called The Job, which aired in 2012. Richard gets a job, that's the whole inciting incident. He's hired to deliver pizzas, and he's happy, and the family is proud, and then reality starts to break. Not metaphorically. The episode depicts the physical universe of Elmore beginning to malfunction, gravity stuttering, matter misbehaving, the fabric of the world tearing like an overloaded machine, and the family figures out the rule that the show then keeps forever. The universe of Elmore is balanced on Richard's uselessness. His unemployment is a cosmological constant. If Richard becomes productive, existence itself becomes unstable, and so, for the good of all reality, the most loving thing this father can do is nothing. The family has to sabotage his job to save the world. As a joke, it's a perfect inversion of the sitcom dad formula. As lore, and this is my reading, it's the show's most affectionate piece of design, because the show built a universe in which its most ridiculous character is structurally essential exactly as he is. Richard doesn't need to be fixed, improved, or made useful. The standard arc's television runs on its lazy fathers. In Elmore, fixing Richard would end the world. The reject doesn't get rehabilitated. The world gets built around the reject. That is the remedial school pitch again, answered with maximum tenderness. Some characters hold up the universe precisely by being unemployable in it. So that's the family ledger, a mother voiced by the same woman as the girlfriend, carrying her unlived lives through a supermarket. A father whose idleness is a law of physics, a daughter who outran time, a son who was drawn as a fish and promoted to brother by sheer attachment, and a blue cat legally named after a chewing gum dispenser by his own choice. And since we're cataloging the people who secretly hold Elmore up, there's one more name that belongs beside Richard's, and he isn't even a Watterson. Larry Needlemeyer, the long-suffering rock person you have seen in literally every commercial establishment in town, because that's the joke. Larry works everywhere. He's the supermarket cashier, the gas station attendant, the pizza man, the clerk at every counter the plot ever requires, one exhausted employee wearing the name tag of an entire economy, and the show ran his omnipresence as background seasoning for years before deciding to weigh it. The weighing happens in the 25th episode of Season 3, The Pizza, the 101st episode of the series, in which the Wattersons finally push Larry one indignity too far, and Larry quits all of his jobs simultaneously, and Elmore collapses that afternoon. Not metaphorically, the episode stages a complete civilizational apocalypse, fires, riots, society reverting to wasteland logic in hours, because it turns out the entire town was a machine with one employee and the machine just resigned. The family has to cross the ruins their own rudeness created and beg him back to work, and the world restores itself the moment he agrees, as instantly as it fell. The hidden fact is the cosmology again, and it pairs with Richard's like a matched set. This universe runs on two pillars, a man who must never work and a man who must never stop, and the town between them never thanks either one. The show implies, with a completely straight face, that this is how all towns work, and the older I get, the harder that joke lands. The collapse and restoration montage in that episode is its own hidden masterclass, and it pairs with a detail fans love about Larry's design history. The character's full name is Larry Needlemeyer, and across the series the show kept finding new counters to put him behind, until cataloging Larry's jobs became a fandom sport in itself. The supermarket, the gas station, the pizza place, the video store, the bank, wherever the plot needs a weary professional, the same rockface is waiting with the same dead-eyed patience. The hidden fact is that the show was building, job by job, background gag by background gag, the precondition for the pizza's apocalypse years before it cashed the joke. That's this production's signature move, visible everywhere once you know to look for it. Plant a pattern as a joke. Let it run until the audience stops noticing it. Then, seasons later, weaponize the pattern, and the payoff lands twice as hard because the setup was installed in your brain without your consent. Miracle Star got an episode, Larry's overemployment got an apocalypse. Banana Barbara's paintings got a finale. The show treated its own running gags as long-term investments, and the back half of the series is essentially the portfolio maturing, one buried setup at a time, which is why rewatching Gumball feels so unlike rewatching its peers. The early seasons of most gag shows are just early. The early seasons of this one are loaded. While we're on the subject of what audience is ratified, here's a small tour of the scoreboard because the numbers themselves are a hidden fact. The show's best-loved episodes on IMDb's user ratings post numbers that prestige dramas would frame. The choices: Nicole's Supermarket Reverie at 9.8, the series' summit; The Job, the reality-breaking employment episode from Season 2 at 9.5. The Furies anime showdown at 9.4. The Money's budget collapse at 9.2. The Zombie Joy Plague at 9.0. Notice the pattern in that list, and I'll flag it as my observation rather than anyone's official statement. The highest-rated episodes of this gag cartoon are almost uniformly the experiments, the heavy ones, the formal stunts, the episodes where the show risked being something other than funny. The audience kept voting for a decade for the show at its most daring, and the show kept reading the votes and daring further. That feedback loop, viewer courage rewarding creative courage, is as responsible as any writer for the heights the final seasons reached. Hold the family there, warm and ridiculous, and Larry there, eternally on shift, because the rest of tonight belongs to the boy the universe threw away, and all of them together are what he'll be measured against. The story of Rob is the story of the show growing up, and it begins before the show even existed in the prototype materials. Among the early development artifacts cataloged by the show's archivists, the character existed in embryonic form in the early pitch reel era, one more design in the pile. In the broadcast show, he first walks on screen in the Season 1 episode The Party as a background body, a tall, slim, blue cyclops with auburn hair, playing party games in the crowd, sharing scenes with, of all people, Molly, the girl the Void would later swallow. He is, in those early seasons, furniture. He gets no individual lines in Season 1 at all. The Records fans keep note that his voice exists in that era only as part of crowd noise in the episode The Fight. He's so marginal that, as the story goes among fans, when viewers asked one of the show's head writers, James Lamont, who the Blue Cyclops from The Party even was, the first answer was a joke, essentially, that they do not speak of him before the name Rob was finally given. I should flag that anecdote as community lore, the kind of thing preserved on fan wikis with a citation needed tag next to it. But it's perfect either way because a character whose own production team could joke about not speaking of him is exactly the character this storyline needed. There's even a technical wrinkle that nobody watching could have known was foreshadowing. In Season 1, Rob was animated as a three-dimensional computer model. In Season 2, the production quietly converted him into a flat, two-dimensional drawing. The show changed his fundamental medium between seasons, the way you'd swap a prop, because who would notice and who would care? Remember that. The boy's body was never stable. The production itself treated his existence as negotiable, format to format, season to season. And then, in Season 3, the universe inside the show caught up with how the universe outside the show had always treated him. You already know the mechanism because we toured it earlier tonight. The Void, the dimension where Elmore's mistakes are filed. The show's lore, as consolidated across the episodes and the wiki that documents them, is that Rob was taken by it. The world, in the fan wiki's blunt phrasing, became aware of his uselessness, and the universe did to him what it does to all its errata. He was deleted, not killed, deleted, removed from the records, forgotten by everyone, parked in the white nothing alongside the failed fads and the rejected house designs. That's where The Void, the Season 3 episode, finds him, drifting in the background of someone else's rescue. And here's the cruelest beat in the entire series, hiding in that episode. When Gumball, Darwin, and Mr. Small barrel through the void to save Molly, Rob sees them. The later episodes confirm what was happening in that moment. He tried to get their attention, tried to be noticed, tried to be saved. They were there for the girl they remembered. Nobody was there for the boy nobody remembered. They rescued Molly and left, and Rob did the only thing left to do. He grabbed on. The lore specifies the exact, undignified mechanics. He clung to the back of Janice, Mr. Small's beloved van, as it tore out of the void, and the dimensional doorway closed on him as he was dragged through it. He survived. The doorway didn't care. Crossing back into reality that way cost him his body. The character who re-emerges in late Season 3 is unrecognizable. A tall, jagged figure of mismatched parts, one huge eye, a frame that looks like a transmission failing, with whole regions of his body replaced by living static, the kind of corrupted snow you'd see on a broken television. The production detail here is gorgeous, and almost nobody knows it. From his return onward, Rob is animated as a three-dimensional computer model again, but with his face animated flat in 2 dimensions layered onto the model. His broken body is literally made of the show's 2 animation styles failing to agree with each other. The boy who was converted from one medium to another between seasons came back wearing the conversion error as a wound. And the static on his body isn't decorative randomness either. The show's artists gave it rules. It distorts harder and darker when he's angry. It stays oriented the same way no matter how he turns, like a flaw printed on the film rather than on the man. It even glows in the dark, which the show demonstrates in the exact episode where he returns. That episode is The Nobody, the 36th episode of Season 3, broadcast in 2015, and it's constructed as a horror mystery. Objects vanish around the Watterson house. Food disappears. Evidence accumulates that something is living with the family inside the walls of their home, and the episode lets that premise breathe long enough to get genuinely unsettling before the reveal. The intruder's in the basement, a basement the Wattersons, in a perfect piece of cartoon logic, had never once noticed they had. And the intruder is Rob, except he doesn't know he's Rob. The passage through the void's closing door took his memory along with his shape. The episode's centerpiece is this disfigured, glitching stranger trying to explain his own existence to two children, a person with no name, no past, no place in the world's records, asking the world's two most oblivious optimists to help him figure out who he is. They do. That's the thing about Gumball and Darwin. They're useless and they're kind, and the kindness works. The memories come back. And this is where the episode pivots from horror into the saddest joke the show ever told. Rob remembers everything. He remembers being a student. He remembers the void. And above all, he remembers the van, the rescue that wasn't for him, the two boys who came into the place where he was imprisoned, looked past him, saved someone else, and went home. The person who gave him back his memory is the person the memory indicts. So Rob, standing in the basement with his rebuilt past, makes a decision that is somehow both completely insane and completely reasonable. If the world has no role for him, he will seize the only role currently vacant in Gumball's story. Villain. He declares himself Gumball's nemesis, vows revenge, commits his ruined body to a life of evil. And Gumball and Darwin, and this detail is the whole show in one beat, are happy for him. They walk away genuinely pleased, the way you'd be pleased for a friend who finally picked a college major. He has direction now. He has purpose. The fact that the purpose is destroying them is, in their assessment, a detail. I want to mark what the show's doing here because it's the hidden fact under all the visible ones. In 2015, in the middle of its gag machine prime, this series quietly committed to a serialized villain arc built entirely out of its own production methods. The villain's origin isn't radioactivity or trauma in the usual sense. The villain's origin is being a background character. His superpower is knowing how cheaply the world is rendered when nobody important is looking at it. Every other antagonist in animation wants money, power, or revenge for something someone did. Rob wants revenge for something everyone didn't do. Nobody looked at him. That's the crime. The show invented, essentially, a villain whose tragic backstory is the experience of being a minor character in a television show. And then it had the discipline to play that premise as farce for 2 full seasons before letting it turn serious. The farce era peaks immediately in the second episode of Season 4, The Nemesis. Rob's villain career is failing. His traps don't spring. His schemes dissolve. He is, by every measurable standard, terrible at the one job he assigned himself, and the episode finds him on the verge of giving the whole thing up. What happens next is the strangest mentorship in children's television. Gumball and Darwin, horrified at the thought of losing their nemesis, the one piece of narrative structure their chaotic lives have, decide to save his villainy. They coach him, they build him up, they essentially run a small business incubator for evil. And it's during this rehabilitation that 2 famous things happen. The boys christen him with a proper villain name, Dr. Wrecker, a name Rob takes to immediately. And they decide his voice isn't menacing enough, so they modify it, dialing him into that deep, plummy, theatrical British register, the David Warner voice, the actual David Warner, as we covered earlier, one of the great screen villains of the 20th century, hired by a cartoon to be the punchline of a joke about hiring great screen villains. The episode ends with the boys having succeeded far too well. They wanted a functional nemesis. They built a real one. The hatred they fueled for fun stops being fun, episode by episode, from here to the end of the series. The new and improved Dr. Wrecker gets his first full-scale supervillain outing in the Season 4 episode The Bus, and it is gloriously unhinged. Rob hijacks the school bus with everyone aboard, students, adults, the whole rolling cast of Elmore, armed with a briefcase rigged to explode, demanding $1 million, monologuing in Warner's Velvet Menace. It's a hostage thriller parody stuffed inside a children's cartoon, complete with the detail preserved lovingly by fans, that Rob claims to hold a degree in Canadian history, a credential of perfectly Rob, like uselessness, impressive sounding, applicable to nothing, almost certainly impossible for a junior high student to have earned. The scheme naturally collapses. The briefcase goes off in the wrong hands at the wrong moment, launching Rob skyward, and he lands with the universe's usual courtesy toward him directly on a police car. But the episode hides one small, warm landmark in all the chaos. Gumball, who has spent the entire arc running a gag of never remembering Rob's name, calling him every one-syllable name except the right one, says it correctly in this episode. Rob. It costs Gumball nothing, and it's everything Rob ever actually wanted, and the show just lets it sit there, unremarked. A single frame of being known buried inside a bomb plot. The fans keep track of these moments, the short list of episodes where Gumball gets the name right, like birdwatchers logging a rare sighting. That list, and what it implies about when Gumball is actually paying attention, is its own quiet map of the whole relationship. There's a beautiful piece of fan accounting attached to that running gag, and it deserves its minute, because it might be the subtlest piece of writing in the entire series. The wiki keepers, the people who track this show frame by frame, maintain a list of the episodes in which Gumball says Rob's name correctly. The complete list, per their records, is 5 episodes long. The Bus, the Rerun, the X, the Future, the Inquisition. Now look at what those 5 episodes actually are. The Bomb Scheme, the Time War where they almost became friends, the Breakup, the Prophecy, the End of the World. 5 episodes, and they are, almost exactly, the 5 emotional summits of the entire relationship. The 5 moments where the stakes were real and the performance dropped. Everywhere else, in the low stakes everywhere else, Gumball fumbles the name, plays the indifference, keeps the bit alive. But every single time the floor genuinely opens under one of them, the right name comes out. First try, no joke attached, and the show never once points at the pattern. No character notices it, nothing underlines it. It's just stitched across 5 seasons, waiting for someone patient enough to count. The portrait of a boy whose true attention only surfaces under pressure. Like a watermark you can only see when you hold the page up to the light. Whether the writers tracked it deliberately has never been confirmed, so file the intent as unknown and the pattern as fact. The indifference was a costume. The name was always in there. Everything in the arc so far has been escalation with a safety net. The net comes off on September 5th, 2016. That day, Cartoon Network aired 2 episodes back-to-back, The Disaster, the 40th and final episode of Season 4, and The Rerun, the first episode of Season 5, a continuous 2-part story straddling the season break like a bridge over a canyon. Together they are the show's first true mythology event, and the hidden facts inside them reframe the entire series. In The Disaster, Rob acquires the universal remote, the device we discussed earlier, the reset button made flesh. Pause, rewind, fast forward, mute, applied to reality itself. And with the most powerful object in the show's universe in his hand, Rob does something far more interesting than destroying the world. He edits Gumball's life. He fast forwards Penny into heartbreak. He breaks the family. He dismantles, with a craftsman's patience, every single thing that makes Gumball's existence worth living, while Gumball scrambles helplessly inside his own ruined story. The episode is genuinely upsetting in a way the show had never attempted because the violence isn't physical, it's editorial. Rob doesn't attack Gumball, he rewrites him, and in the middle of it, the show detonates its biggest idea. Rob knows. The dialogue makes it explicit, and the fan wikis have enshrined it as the arc's foundation. Rob understands that he is a character in a fiction. He talks about the role he was given. He tells Gumball, in essence, that he never wanted to be the villain, that the part was forced on him, and that his real grievance is structural. Gumball is the protagonist. The world bends toward Gumball the way light bends toward a lens, and everyone else in Elmore is supporting cast at best, set dressing at worst. And Rob has been to the place where the set dressing gets thrown away. His plan, stated almost plainly, is to displace the protagonist, because in his understanding of the universe, whoever the camera loves cannot be deleted. The villainy was never the point. The remote was never the point. The point was billing. This is, as far as I know, the only children's cartoon villain whose master plan is essentially a labor dispute with the narrative itself, and I'll flag that framing as my reading, but the underlying facts, his awareness of being fictional, his stated resentment of the protagonist role, his never wanted to be the villain confession, are canon on screen in the episode. The disaster ends with Rob victorious and Gumball effectively erased from his own life, and then the rerun, airing minutes later, runs the canyon back. Gumball gets the remote, rewinds, replays. The two of them end up fighting through the same stretch of time, dueling edits, and the fight funnels them both back to the one location that explains everything: the void. The white nothing opens again, and this time it's Rob dangling over the lip of deletion, the remote out of reach, and Gumball, the boy whose charmed protagonist life Rob wanted to steal, reaches down to save him. The show holds the moment, the hands, the hesitation, and in that hesitation is the entire hidden truth of the relationship, because Gumball does reach, and what the episode then does with the remote is the arc's most quietly devastating fact. Rob ends up with the device one last time, and he uses it, not to win, but to undo. He rewinds the catastrophe he caused. He surrenders omnipotence to repair the timeline, and the repair cost him the one thing he'd accidentally gained along the way: the moment of connection, the almost reconciliation. Because once time rewinds, nobody remembers any of it, nobody except him. The lore is specific on this point. Rob is the only character who retains the memory of the entire two-parter. The protagonist goes back to his charmed life with no idea any of it happened. The villain carries the whole event alone, including the memory of being saved, and of saving everyone, and of it counting for nothing. And appreciate from a pure craft standpoint what the production pulled off across those two episodes, because the hidden fact here is structural. The disaster in the rerun aired as a season finale and a season premiere, broadcast back-to-back on a single night, which means the show built its most emotionally serious story across the one seam in television where nothing serious is supposed to live. The gap between seasons, the place where shows reset, recast, and quietly forget. Gumball put its only unforgettable event exactly there. The story about a boy who remembers what the format erases was itself staged across the format's most notorious memory hole. Nobody involved has ever confirmed that symmetry was deliberate, so file it as the observation of someone who has spent too long with this show, but I don't believe in coincidences that elegant. Sit with that for a second, because the show certainly did. It built a character whose defining trait is that he remembers what the show forgets. Every other resident of Elmore lives inside the sitcom reset, wiped clean weekly, innocent by amnesia. Rob lives outside it in continuity, which is to say in consequence, which is to say in something very close to the real world. The fans who call Rob the only real person in Elmore are making a joke that isn't a joke. The structure of the show agrees with them. After a trauma like that, the storyline needed somewhere to exhale. And the show, being this show, chose to exhale through the most ridiculous possible door. Season 5's 25th episode, The X, aired in 2017, and the premise alone is a hidden gem of the entire series. Rob dumps Gumball. Not romantically, the title is doing a bit, but the episode plays every beat of it as a breakup story. Gumball discovers that Rob has moved on to a new nemesis, that he's been pouring his villainous attention into, of all people, Banana Joe, the class banana, because, as Rob explains with brutal simplicity, Joe is easier to hate. And Gumball, who has spent years treating Rob as a nuisance, an afterthought, a name he can't be bothered to remember, absolutely falls apart. Penny tries to console him. He spirals, he sabotages, he fights openly to win back the exclusive hatred of his enemy, jealous of a banana, while the episode wrings every drop of comedy out of breakup convention. The moping, the stalking, the grand gesture. The hidden fact tucked into The X beyond its premise is what it does with sympathy. For 3 seasons, the audience had been trained to pity Rob, the abandoned one, the forgetting world's only rememberer. This episode quietly flips the experiment. Here it's Gumball who knows something real existed and watches the other party walk away from it unbothered. Gumball who can't make anyone understand what he's lost. Gumball who is suddenly the custodian of a relationship the other person has moved on from. The show hands the protagonist for 11 minutes a child-sized portion of Rob's exact condition, and the protagonist absolutely cannot take it. He dismantles his own dignity to escape a feeling Rob has lived in since season 3. The episode never points at the symmetry, it never has to. That's the show's oldest trick. Teach the audience the shape of a wound on one character, then press the same shape gently into another, and let the recognition do the work. It's one of the funniest episodes of the late seasons, and it's doing serious work in disguise, because the episode establishes, through pure farce, the fact the finale will depend on. These two need each other. The nemesis bond is, functionally, the most attended relationship in either of their lives. Rob organized his entire post-deletion existence around Gumball's attention, and the X reveals the dependency runs both directions, that the protagonist requires his antagonist, that being hated by Rob had become, without Gumball ever noticing, one of the load-bearing certainties of his world. The show implies it everywhere and states it nowhere, which is exactly how real attachments work. You discover them at the moment of withdrawal. Fans of the show have spent years debating what to call this bond, rivalry, friendship, something the show deliberately left unlabeled. What's canon is the shape of it. When Rob stopped hating him, Gumball couldn't bear it and won him back. The late season 6 stretch then begins arming the finale in earnest, and 2 episodes carry the payload. In the spin-offs, Rob escalates from threatening people to threatening the format, taking the internet itself, which in Elmore is a physical character, hostage, in a scheme aimed at hijacking the show, and I mean that literally. The episode's conceit is an attack on the program you are watching. And then comes the future, the 34th episode of Season 6, the Banana Barbara episode we set up earlier tonight. Now you know who the dark figure behind her in the painting is. Rob kidnaps the prophet painter, and the episode reveals what turned the farce villain back into a desperate one. Through Barbara's paintings, Rob has seen where everything is headed, and what he's seen, the lore that the finale will run on, is catastrophe. Elmore's future ending in the void. The white nothing coming for everyone, the entire town headed for the same deletion he survived. The one person in Elmore who knows what deletion feels like is the one person who learns it's coming for everybody. During the episode's reality-bending struggle, Rob is briefly erased from existence entirely, undone, gone, and is only saved when Barbara paints him back into the world. Painted back, I should note, with one absurd revision because Gumball requests it, a little curly pig's tail, which Rob then canonically wears for the remainder of the original series. A permanent doodle on the body of the show's most tragic character, the kind of joke this series cannot resist leaving on its own most serious page. The boy made of rendering errors ends the series partially hand-drawn by a banana at the request of his best enemy. There is no other show where that sentence means something, and here it's load-bearing canon, which brings us to June 24th, 2019, The Inquisition, episode 44 of season 6, episode 240 of the series, and for 6 long years, the last episode of The Amazing World of Gumball that existed anywhere on Earth. A new superintendent arrives at Elmore Junior High. He is, as we covered, played by a live-action human actor, Garrick Hagon, a flesh-and-blood man composited into the cartoon. And his agenda is right there in his bearing. He has come to put a stop to the students' cartoonish ways. The weird kids are to be normalized. The impossible bodies, the talking food, the living puppets, all of it is to be brought into line with reality, and the episode dramatizes exactly what that means. Students converted one by one into unsettling live-action human versions of themselves. The school that has spent 6 seasons as a sanctuary for every rejected design in the commercial art industry is being processed, child by child, into stock footage. A cartoon about cartoons chose, as its final boss, the demand that everyone stop being cartoons. And then the mask comes off, and the hidden fact underneath is the whole series folding into a single point. The superintendent, this human enforcer of reality, is Rob, the most broken cartoon in Elmore, disguised as the realest thing the show could photograph. And his motive, the reveal the entire arc was built to deliver, is not conquest, it's rescue. Rob saw Banana Barbara's paintings. He knows the void is coming for Elmore, that the white nothing will take the whole town the way it once took him. And his plan, mad and sincere in exactly equal measure, is that the void takes cartoons, mistakes, absurdities. So if everyone stops being a cartoon, if every impossible child is converted into a plain, real, photographic human, there will be nothing left for the void to claim. He isn't trying to destroy Elmore, he's trying to make Elmore too boring to delete. The villain whose origin was being thrown away has spent his endgame trying to make sure no one else ever qualifies for the trash. The plan, the episode is honest about this, fails. It was always going to fail. You cannot save a thing by amputating everything it is, and the show knows that's the real horror in the premise, that the cure is just the disease with paperwork. And spare a thought for what the conversion scenes actually look like, because the finale's imagery is the show's whole mixed media philosophy turned inside out. For 9 years, the joke was that anything could be a person, a photograph, a render, a chin. The Inquisition weaponizes the same compositing in reverse. Children you've known for a decade replaced by uncanny live-action stand-ins. The camera holding on them just long enough for the wrongness to bloom. And the wrongness is precise. These aren't humans. They're what a cartoon thinks it's supposed to become when it's told to grow up. The show that spent its whole life proving every medium belongs in the frame ends with a man insisting only one medium is allowed, and the man is a costume. And inside the costume is the one child the mediums failed. The ending arrives fast and stays unresolved. The void breaches Elmore, the school floor fractures, and the final canonical image of the original series is Rob, the boy the void already ate once, clinging to a crumbling shard of Elmore Junior High as the white nothing widens beneath him, while the world he tried to save comes apart. There's no rescue shown, no resolution. The series, 240 episodes of jokes about endings, ends mid-fall. A literal cliffhanger, the most literal one in animation history, and then the network simply never aired another minute. Season 7 was not ordered. The story stopped the way a tape stops, mid-frame, and an entire generation of viewers walked around for years with that image lodged somewhere behind the sternum. A children's comedy that ended on its saddest character falling back into the thing that ruined him, reaching up with nobody reaching down. The night that finale aired deserves its own line in the file because the audience's experience of it has become part of the show's history. June 24th, 2019, and the fandom's gathering place is filled, in real time, with the same disbelieving question in 100 phrasings that cannot be the end. Where is the rest? When is the rest? And the rest did not come. No next week, no announcement. The schedule rolled into reruns and the image stayed exactly where the broadcast had abandoned it. A boy and a piece of floor and the white. And people who watched it live still describe the specific texture of that evening, refreshing feeds, checking listings, slowly metabolizing the realization that a 9-year fixture of their childhood had just stopped, mid-breath on purpose. Shows end all the time, and fandoms grieve them. And the grief usually has somewhere to go, a finale to argue about, a resolution to rank. This grief had no container, it was grief for a sentence with no period, and it stayed fresh for years, precisely because nothing about it ever finished happening. The hidden fact is that the cliffhanger did not just end a show, it created a community-wide condition, 6 years long, with its own anniversaries, and you can still find the scar tissue in any comment section where the finale is mentioned. 1,000 variations of, I was there, I remember the night the floor opened. Why did it end like that? The production history answers part of it, and the answer is its own hidden fact. Ben Bockley had publicly announced years earlier that he intended to step away from the series after season 6, and the finale was built to function as both a season ender and a series ender. The cliffhanger reads, and I'll mark this as interpretation rather than a documented quote, like a deliberate door left open, a dare to the network, finish this story or live with the fall. For a while, it looked like the dare had worked. On September 21st, 2021, Cartoon Network and the streaming service, then called HBO Max, officially greenlit The Amazing World of Gumball, the movie, with Bockley himself attached to direct, a film explicitly positioned to resolve the cliffhanger alongside word of a new series to follow. The announcement was real, covered across the entertainment press, celebrated by fans as the rescue finally arriving. And then corporate reality did its corporate thing. In August of 2022, amid the massive restructuring that followed the Warner Bros. Discovery merger, the era of shelved films and content write-offs, it was reported that the Gumball movie would no longer be heading to HBO Max, that the finished plans were being shopped to other outlets, fate unknown. The franchise about a boy dangling over a deletion dimension was itself now dangling over a deletion dimension. I want to be careful here, as always, to separate registers. What's documented is the green light, the director attachment, the August 2022 reporting, and the years of public silence that followed. The internal deliberations, who fought for it, how close it came to vanishing entirely, remained corporate dark matter, and anything you read about those specifics is speculation. And the audience kept vigil through all of it, which deserves its own line in the historical record. Across those limbo years, the fan community did not disperse. It archived. The wikis grew more detailed, not less. The side-by-side Vallejo photo threads kept updating, the episode rankings kept getting argued, the finale kept getting reanalyzed frame by frame, the cliffhanger kept trending on anniversaries, an entire fandom behaving For 6 years, like the staff of a lighthouse whose ship was definitely eventually coming back. Networks measure demand in many ways, and one of them, the oldest one, is simply noise that refuses to die down. Whatever spreadsheets ultimately revived this franchise, the noise was real, sustained, and global. And it started the night the school floor cracked and never really stopped. What's also documented is that the silence wasn't total. The franchise was kept warm through those limbo years with 2 strange little artifacts that completists should know about. In December of 2019, 6 months after the finale, Cartoon Network aired Darwin's Yearbook, a 6-episode miniseries running from the 14th to the 28th of that month, framed as Darwin assembling the school yearbook, built largely from clips of old episodes stitched together with new material. And in October of 2020, beginning on the 5th with an installment called The Curse of Elmore, came the Gumball Chronicles, another clip-driven series of shorts including an entire arc spoofing an election. Clip shows, yes, but notice what they mean in the show's own language. After the void took everything, the franchise survived as recycled footage of itself. Memories replayed in new frames, a show literally rerunning while its actual story hung suspended. Even Gumball's Limbo was on theme. And then, finally, the door opened. The project that emerged from the long shopping process was not the movie. It was a full revival series, produced by Hanna-Barbera Studios Europe, the renamed descendant of the very London operation where Bacalé had once pitched his pile of rejects, and it arrived under a new title, The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball. It premiered on Hulu in the United States on July 28, 2025, with the international premiere following on Cartoon Network and HBO Max on October 6th. Think about what that premiere meant mechanically for a second, because it's the most on-brand detail in the whole saga. The franchise survived its limbo the way Darwin crossed the desert, by refusing to accept the category it had been filed under. Cancelled shows stay cancelled, that's the filing system. This one grew legs. And when it arrived on the far shore, the first thing the new series did was reach back for the boy on the ledge, which means the revival's very existence performs the show's oldest thesis, that nothing thrown away is gone if someone keeps wanting it back badly enough, and this time the someone was the audience itself. The casting carried the show's oldest tradition forward, the children's roles passed to a new generation, Gumball voiced now by Alcaio Thiele, Darwin by Hero Hunter, and, for the first time ever, a new Anais, Kinza Syed Khan stepping into the role Kyla Ray Kowalewski had held for the entire original run, the last constant finally changing. And the adults, of course, did not change. Teresa Gallagher and Dan Russell returned as Nicole and Richard, the 2 British constants still painting the town. The revival walked straight back into the unfinished business too. The cliffhanger that had hung in the air since 2019 was finally canonically addressed in the new series, in an episode titled, With the franchise's usual self-awareness, the rewrite. Rob's fall, the Fate fans had argued about for 6 years, stopped being an open wound and became story again. Without spoiling the specifics for those of you saving it, the records now describe a Rob on the other side of all of it, no longer the villain of the piece, keeping shop in Elmore, of all the endings the boy from the void could have gotten, an ordinary place in the town that once threw him away. The pigtail, the wiki notes with bookkeeping precision, is gone as of the rewrite. Even the doodle got resolved. One more detail from the revival's paperwork rewards attention. In its development era, the project that became the wonderfully weird world of Gumball was referred to, in places, as a 7th season, before arriving under its own title, and that nuance tells you what the production understood itself to be doing. Not a reboot, not a reimagining, the industry's favorite words for starting over without debts, a continuation, with the debts honored, the cliffhanger paid, the cast list rebuilt around the same families, and the new title reading less like a fresh start than like a renewal of vows. The same world sworn again with one adjective upgraded. Franchises rarely resist the clean slate when 6 years and a corporate restructuring have passed. Slates don't get cleaner than that, and this one resisted because the unfinished business was the asset. The fall was the most valuable frame the franchise owned. You don't reboot your way past a debt like that. You land it, and they landed it, and the records of the landing are now part of the same wiki that spent 6 years keeping the boys' file open. And the records of the new series carry a few more details worth filing before we move on, because each one quietly closes a loop the original show left open. The wiki's bookkeeping notes that as of the rewrite, Rob is animated as a flat, two-dimensional character again, one body, one medium, the compositing error finally rendered whole, and the production did it in the same breath as his redemption, which is either pipeline coincidence or the most elegant visual storytelling decision in the franchise's history, and I know which way I lean. His occupation, once listed as villain, now reads as the owner of the Awesome Store, a little van of mysterious goods inherited from its previous shady proprietor, and his relationship ledger, once a wall of enemies and formers, now lists Gumball and Darwin among his friends. The character description the fan archives lead with for the boy whose whole story began with the world becoming aware of his uselessness is that he stands as Elmore's protector against the void. The new series also continued the franchise's oldest tradition in his corner of the cast list. The records list a new voice behind him for the revival era. The role handed forward the way every role in this franchise eventually is. The boy who was once converted between file formats because nobody would notice now has continuity, a job, friends, and a fixed body. Which is to say, the revival gave Rob the four things the original universe spent a decade denying him. And it did it in its first stretch of episodes, like it had been waiting 6 years to put things right. Because it had. Everyone had. By December of 2025, the entertainment press was reporting that the revival had been handed a 2-season order, the franchise's future more secure than at any point since the original finale aired. 6 years from cliffhanger to continuation. The fall lasted longer than some entire shows. We're in the deep part of the night now, so let me open 2 last drawers before we close up. Smaller facts, stranger ones, the kind that don't fit anywhere else. The first drawer is labeled horror because one of the least discussed truths about this cheerful family comedy is that it kept making horror, real horror, the kind that got episodes passed around the internet with warnings attached, and it kept getting away with it. A word on why this drawer exists at all, because it's a production fact in its own right. Gumball aired on a children's network under children's content standards in daytime slots, and it kept clearing horror past all of it, not by hiding the horror, but by translating it. Blacked out eyes pass review when the cause is a hug. Existential annihilation passes when the victim is toast. The censors read the nouns, the kids read the nouns, the adults in the room read the grammar, and the grammar, again and again, was pure genre horror, executed with complete technical fluency by a crew that had clearly watched everything. It's one more way the mixed media did secret work. When nothing looks consistent, nothing looks like a violation either, and the show drove entire convoys of darkness through that loophole for 9 years. Exhibit 1 is the 4th episode of Season 3, The Joy, broadcast in 2014, the 80th episode of the series. The premise sounds like a greeting card. Happiness is contagious. The execution is a full zombie outbreak film. A hug transmits a condition the show treats with complete epidemiological seriousness. Infected children with blacked out eyes, faces split by involuntary smiles, rainbow-colored slime, shambling through the halls of Elmore Junior High in herds, attack hugging the uninfected while the school descends into quarantine logic, barricades, last stands, the whole grammar of the genre, performed by 12-year-olds, about joy itself. It remains one of the highest-rated episodes of the entire series on IMDb, sitting at 9.0, and it taught the audience early that this show considered no genre off-limits, provided the monster was an emotion. Exhibit 2 is the 6th episode of that same season, The Recipe, and this one fans cite when they want to argue the show smuggled genuine existential horror past the censors. Gumball and Darwin discover the secret of their classmate Anton, the cheerful little piece of toast. Anton, it turns out, is not durable. He dies, often, in the casual way fragile things die. And his parents, the show reveals with breathtaking calm, simply bake a new one. There is a recipe. The boy is bred. Each morning after a fatal mishap, a fresh Anton walks to school with the old Anton's memories. And no one, including Anton, treats this as anything but logistics. The boys, being boys, steal the recipe and start baking their own Antons, and the episode follows the consequences all the way down. A clone army, a duplicate, Ant 1, who understands what he is and decides the original is the problem. Silhouettes of Antons destroying Antons while the camera politely pans away. A children's show about a piece of toast quietly ran a complete meditation on the disposability of identity, on whether a perfect copy that remembers your life is you, and it aired in the early afternoon between commercials for cereal. and Exhibit 3 aired late in Season 5, the 36th episode, The Puppets, in 2017, and this one comes with documented pedigree. Darwin rediscovers a box of his old puppet friends, hand puppets he'd outgrown, and one of them, a gray, triangle-headed thing named Grady, is not interested in being outgrown. The episode tips fully into surreal puppet horror, musical numbers that curdle mid-verse, a fuzzy pastel world that runs on abandonment and control. Darwin pulled into the puppet dimension as Grady's permanent playmate, and anyone who spent time on the internet in the 2010s recognized the specific flavor immediately. It is the aesthetic of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, the legendary British puppet horror series, and the entertainment press covered the episode precisely as that. Gumball crossing streams with the most disturbing puppets on the internet. Grady appears in exactly one episode of the series, and one was enough. He's the only Gumball character I'd genuinely warn a child about, and the show made him out of felt. What this resume suggests, and I'll file it as interpretation, is that Gumball's true genre was never comedy. It was permission. The mixed media gave it permission to look like anything, so the writing took permission to be anything: sitcom at 2 in the afternoon, zombie film by 2:15, puppet hell by the credits. The hidden fact is the range itself. There are horror franchises with less effective horror than this show about a blue cat, and there are prestige dramas with less honest grief in them than the next drawer over. Because the second drawer is labeled Faith, literally. The 11th episode of Season 6, the 207th of the series, is called The Faith, and it contains the show's boldest formal experiment, one that almost nobody outside the fandom talks about. Alan, the balloon, the show's resident saint, a character whose optimism the series mocked for years and then slowly revealed to be a kind of moral architecture, loses hope. And when Alan's faith in the world goes out, the show does something televisually shocking. It drains the color. Elmore turns black and white on screen, the photographs and the drawings alike bleached to gray, an entire episode of a children's cartoon shot in morning dress because one balloon stopped believing things could be good. The town's color becomes a communal property, something sustained by collective belief. And the climax is the town, led by Gumball, who has spent 6 seasons finding Alan's goodness personally offensive, singing the color back into the world, singing it back. The cynic of the series leads a musical number to restore a believer's faith because the alternative is a gray world, and the show means it, the way it meant Nicole's Supermarket and Rob's Static. For a series built on irony, the moments it chose to play completely straight-form their own hidden map. And they are always, every time, about someone deciding that someone else is worth keeping. If you're still awake and still here, thank you for staying this long. One gentle reminder, since we're near the end, subscribing costs nothing and tells us you want more nights like this one. Now let's bring it home. Step back from all of it now, the whole landscape we've crossed tonight, and look at the shape it makes. A French animator's folder of rejected mascots. A pitch about a school for rejects, judged too sad to make. A town assembled from photographs of a real, ordinary California city. A cast where no two beings are made of the same material, where a chin can be a classmate, and a Shakespearean legend can hide inside a cyclops. Children's voices burn through and replaced like candles, with the burning written into the story. A copy of the show, in another language, on another continent, defeated on screen. A trash dimension holding the show's own discarded drafts. A mother's unlived lives. A father whose laziness holds up the sky, a prophet with a paintbrush, a villain whose origin story is being a background character, who learned the world was disposable by being disposed of, who tried to save everyone by making them boring, and who fell and hung there, falling, for 6 years of real time, until a new generation of voices arrived to catch him and hand him a little shop in the town that threw him away. None of that is subtext anymore. All of it is documented, episode numbers and air dates and cast lists, the kind of facts you can look up. And that's the strangest hidden fact of all, that the most absurd cartoon of its era turns out to be, under the chaos, one of the most coherent. Every layer of this show, the production, the casting, the backgrounds, the mythology, is telling the same single story from a different angle. Things get rejected, things get thrown away. And if somebody, anybody, a brother, a mother, a town, an audience, refuses to let go, the thrown away thing grows legs and walks back and becomes family. The show was never hiding its facts. It was hiding its sincerity inside them. And it trusted that the people who loved it enough to look closely would find exactly what you found tonight. And if you want one last hidden fact to carry into sleep, make it this one, the gentlest in the whole file. Everything we've covered tonight, every secret, every seam, was hiding in a children's show that never once needed you to find any of it. A kid watching Gumball with no idea about Vallejo or Warner or Miracle Star or the Rejects folder loses nothing. The episodes work clean, the jokes land without footnotes. The show buried all of this treasure on the strict condition that the surface stay perfect for the audience it was actually for, and that's the discipline that separates hidden depth from homework. Some shows wear their cleverness where you have to admire it to proceed. This one folded its cleverness underneath the floorboards of a comedy about a blue cat, where only the people who loved it enough to pry would ever find it. And then it made the prying worth it, every single time. You pried tonight, it was worth it. It always is with this one. And there's plenty still down there because a show built by people who cared this much never runs out of floorboards. The lights of Elmore are photographs of real streetlights in a real town where real people are sleeping